They sent 50 mercs to kill a kid in a three-piece suit, and they missed. He transformed into a fucking hybrid monster and erased them in under a minute with one finger and wind blades. Pigeon on his shoulder. Heart rate never rose. This is not your soft Naruto. This is a pure goddamn predator.
The blood was still warm when the Anbu arrived. 4 of them dropped through the shattered window frame of apartment 4B in Konoha's orphan district, their masks catching the moonlight as they landed in a synchronized crouch. They were prepared for a kidnapping in progress. They were prepared for a dead child. They were prepared for the worst-case scenario as outlined in Protocol 9, the contingency plan for when foreign operatives successfully located the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. They were absolutely, catastrophically unprepared for what they found. The first operative, Bear Mask, stepped into something wet. He looked down. His sandal was sinking into a pool of arterial spray that covered the floorboards in a sheet of reflective crimson. The walls were painted in it. Great sweeping arcs of red decorated the plaster like brushstrokes from a madman's canvas. 3 bodies lay crumpled against the far wall, their Kumogakure flak jackets torn open from sternum to spine by something with claws the size of kitchen knives. A 4th body was folded backward over the kitchen table, his spine visible through his chest cavity. The 5th, the squad leader, identifiable only by the Junin insignia still pinned to a scrap of fabric on the floor, was in pieces. Plural, distributed across the room with a violence that suggested rage or hunger or both. Bear Mask's hand went to his radio. His finger hovered over the transmit button. He forgot to press it, because in the center of the room, standing perfectly still on the only dry patch of floor remaining, was a 7-year-old boy. He was blonde. He was small. He was small. He was covered from the collarbone down in blood that belonged to other people. And he was changing. His body was compressing. That was the only word for it. Something massive and spotted and terrible was folding itself inward. Muscles shrinking, bones condensing, a tail retracting into the base of a spine that was shortening in real time. The spotted fur receded like a tide pulling back from shore, revealing skin underneath, tan, smooth, belonging to a child. A child whose blue eyes caught the moonlight with a vertical slit pupil that was slowly rounding back to human, the transformation completed in silence. Naruto Uzumaki stood there, 7 years old, barefoot, wearing torn pajama pants and nothing else. His breathing was even. His heart rate, Bear Mask's trained ear could hear it, was resting. 60 beats per minute, maybe less. The boy had just torn 5 adult shinobi apart with his bare hands and transformed back to human form with the composure of someone finishing a morning stretch. Then a white pigeon flew through the broken window. It circled the room once, seemed entirely unbothered by the carnage below, and landed on the boy's right shoulder. It cooed once, settled its feathers, went still. The boy looked at the Anbu. The Anbu looked at the boy. The pigeon looked at everyone and seemed satisfied with the arrangement. Bear Mask finally pressed his radio. His voice came out hoarse. "This is Bear, reporting from target residence. Protocol 9 is resolved. The target is alive. The hostiles are dead. All 5 of them." He paused, swallowed. "Send the Hokage. Send him now." Hiruzen Sarutobi arrived 12 minutes later. He entered through the front door because he was 80 years old, and entering through windows was for people who still needed to prove something. He walked past the Anbu perimeter, past the barrier team already sealing the corridor, past the 2 medical nin who had taken one look inside and decided their services were unnecessary for the residents of the apartment. He stepped into the room. He looked at the walls. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the child. The god of shinobi had seen war. He had seen massacre. He had seen cruelty performed by adults with decades of training and a lifetime of anger behind their hands. He had never seen anything done by a 7-year-old that looked like this. The pigeon on Naruto's shoulder opened its beak. "They came to take me," the pigeon said. Its voice was a child's, light, measured, disturbingly composed. "I declined their offer." Hiruzen's pipe almost fell from his mouth. He caught it. He stared at the bird. He looked at the boy. The boy's lips had never moved. His face remained the same blank wall it had been since the old man entered. Naruto, Hiruzen said, and his voice carried the weight of every war he had survived. What happened to you? The pigeon cooed once. Then it spoke again in that same measured tone. I remembered who I was. Hiruzen studied the child for a long time. The blood on the floor was cooling. The bodies would need to be removed before dawn to prevent a diplomatic incident with Kumogakure. Though Hiruzen was already composing the letter in his mind, the one that would ensure Lightning Country understood exactly what would happen if another team was sent. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight's problem was standing in front of him with a pigeon on his shoulder and the muscle memory of something ancient and lethal coiled behind those blue eyes. And who, Hiruzen asked, keeping his voice steady, were you? The boy opened his own mouth for the first time. His voice was deeper than any 7-year-olds had a right to be. Deeper than some adults Hiruzen employed. It came from the chest, carried weight like a stone dropped into still water. A weapon, Naruto said, the kind you need. Hiruzen Sarutobi made a decision in that moment. He would later record it in his personal journal as the most practical choice available given the circumstances. His advisors would call it a gamble. Danzo would call it an opportunity. And that particular gleam in Danzo's remaining eye told Hiruzen that this child needed to be kept far away from Root's influence. The Hokage did what the Hokage does. He made a weapon into a soldier. He gave the soldier a purpose. He pointed the purpose at the village's enemies and prayed to whatever god still listened that the direction held. Naruto Uzumaki was inducted into a classified training program the following morning. It had a designation number and a filing code and a security clearance level that meant 14 people in the entire village knew it existed. The curriculum was simple. Take what the boy already knew and refine it into something deployable. His body already moved in ways that defied medical explanation. His muscles hardened on instinct to a density that shattered training equipment. His legs generated force that cratered reinforced floors. His fingers punched through training posts like bullets through paper. The Anbu instructors assigned to him lasted 3 months on average before requesting transfers. They cited various reasons. The official paperwork said personality conflicts. The unofficial conversations in the Junin lounge said the boy made their skin crawl. He trained in a black suit he had purchased with his own stipend money from a tailor on 4th Street. He wore a white dress shirt and a slim tie. He was 8 years old and dressed like a funeral director. The pigeon was always present. The pigeon spoke when spoken to. The boy rarely did. By age 9, Naruto Uzumaki could shatter a boulder with a finger. By age 10, he could walk on air. By age 11, he could launch a blade of compressed wind from his leg that cut through 100 meters of reinforced forest. By 12, he had mastered every technique his previous life had ever known, plus something extra, something the Anbu had never seen before and could never get him to explain. Rokuogen, he demonstrated it once during a classified evaluation. Hiruzen and 3 Anbu commanders watched from behind reinforced glass. Naruto stood in front of a training dummy made from chakra-reinforced steel. He placed both fists against its chest. He exhaled once. The dummy exploded from the inside out, not outward, inward first, then out. Every internal support strut shattered simultaneously. The outer shell remained intact for a full half-second before the shockwave reached the surface and launched the fragments across the training ground. The reinforced glass behind which the observers stood cracked from corner to corner. Hiruzen signed the graduation papers that afternoon. Age 12. He assigned the boy to Team Guy because Maito Guy was the only Junin in the village whose physical capabilities even approached the neighborhood of keeping this child contained. And because Guy was fundamentally, constitutionally incapable of being afraid, everyone else was afraid. That was fine. Fear was appropriate. Graduation day arrived on a warm morning in late spring, and Naruto Uzumaki walked into the academy assignment hall wearing a tailored black suit that fit his 12-year-old frame like it was stitched onto his body. White dress shirt, slim black tie with a silver clip. His blonde hair was pulled back tight against his skull. His posture was perfect, spine straight, shoulders set, chin level. A white pigeon sat on his right shoulder with the dignity of a king surveying lesser lands. The room went silent. 27 graduates and their families occupied the hall. Conversations died mid-sentence. Mothers pulled children slightly closer. Fathers narrowed their eyes in confusion because the boy walking down the center aisle looked like he was arriving to collect a debt, and everyone in the room felt instinctively like they owed him something. Kiba Inuzuka leaned toward Shikamaru. Is that Naruto?" Shikamaru's eyes tracked the suited figure with the weary recognition of someone who had heard rumors and was now watching them confirmed in real time. "Troublesome," he muttered, and that single word contained an encyclopedia of meaning. Ino Yamanaka's jaw hung open. "He's wearing a suit. An actual suit. Where does a 12-year-old get a suit tailored like that?" Sakura Haruno said nothing. She was staring at the pigeon. The pigeon seemed to be staring back. Sasuke Uchiha sat in the back row with his arms crossed. His eyes followed Naruto's path to an empty seat near the window. Something in the Uchiha's posture tightened. The unconscious recognition of a predator identifying another predator in shared territory. Sasuke said nothing. His jaw flexed once. Naruto sat down. He crossed one leg over the other. He adjusted his cuffs. Hattori resettled on his shoulder and cooed once, a sound that carried across the silent room with absurd clarity. Iruka Umino stood at the podium and cleared his throat 4 times before his voice cooperated. "Right. Team assignments. Let's begin." The assignments proceeded. Team 7, Sasuke, Sakura, some kid named Sai. Team 8, Hinata, Kiba, Shino. Team 10, Shikamaru, Inoji, standard configurations. The room exhaled with each name that pulled attention away from the boy in the suit. Then Iruka reached the final team. Team Guy, Rock Lee, Neji Hyuga, Tenten, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your Junin commander is Maito Guy. 4 names. A taijutsu prodigy with bowl-cut hair and a jumpsuit. A Hyuga genius with white eyes and a superiority complex. A weapons specialist with twin buns and a scroll on her back. And an assassin in a 3-piece suit with a pigeon. Lee pumped his fist. "Yosh! A 4-person team! Our flames of youth will burn brighter than any." "Lee," Neji interrupted, his voice carrying the tone of someone perpetually inconvenienced. "Stop." Tenten, sitting 3 rows back, looked at the sweeted blonde. She tilted her head. There was a question in her eyes that had nothing to do with fear. They met on Training Ground 9 at noon. The sun was high and the field was wide. Packed earth, training posts, a small forested area at the perimeter. Guy was already there, standing in his signature wide-legged stance, teeth gleaming, thumbs up at maximum deployment. "My beautiful students." Guy's voice carried enough volume to shake leaves from nearby trees. "Today begins the most youthful chapter of your lives. I am Maito Guy, the sublime green beast of Konoha, and I will forge your bodies and spirits into Ku." Guy stopped mid-sentence. Everyone looked at the pigeon. Hattori sat on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto stood with his hands in his pockets, his suit jacket open, his tie catching the breeze with the weight of silk. His face was completely, utterly, aggressively blank. The pigeon's beak opened. "Hattori," the pigeon said in Naruto's calm, measured voice. "Pleased to meet you." Silence. Lee's mouth was open. Neji's Byakugan activated on pure reflex. Tenten's hand went to her weapon scroll, then stopped because she realized she was reaching for a kunai to defend herself from a pigeon, and that was insane. Guy recovered first, because Guy always recovered first. His eyes were shimmering with tears. "The pigeon speaks," he bellowed, his voice cracking with emotion. "Such an unorthodox expression of youth. You communicate through your feathered companion. This is poetry. This is the kind of creative spirit that—" "Guy-sensei," the pigeon said, "I prefer efficiency." Guy froze. Then he cried harder. "Efficient youth, even more beautiful." Lee was vibrating. "Naruto-san, your pigeon, does it truly speak your words? Is this a technique? A bloodline? Can I learn?" The pigeon's head turned toward Lee. "I have trained my body to be the ultimate weapon. The pigeon is my voice when my voice is unnecessary. You may address Hattori. I will hear you." Lee nodded so hard his head blurred. "Understood, Hattori-san." Neji's Byakugan was still active. He was staring at Naruto's chakra network with an expression that was slowly transitioning from confusion to something colder. "His tenketsu," Neji murmured. "They're wrong. The chakra flow is concentrated entirely in his musculature. Every pathway feeds directly into physical enhancement. I've never seen a network structured like this." Tenten heard him. She filed it away. She was still looking at the suited boy, at the pigeon on his shoulder, at the way he stood with his weight perfectly distributed and his hands loose in his pockets, like he was waiting for a bus instead of meeting his team for the first time. There was something about the shape of him, something that suggested an incredible density of purpose, compressed into a frame that seemed too young for it. All right, Guy clapped his hands together. Introductions, dreams, rivals. Let's go around. Lee, you first. Lee launched into his speech about becoming a splendid ninja through taijutsu alone. Neji delivered a terse summary about fulfilling what fate demanded of him. Tenten spoke about becoming a legendary weapons master who proved that girls could stand at the top. Then it was Naruto's turn. Silence. The pigeon cooed. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Hattori said, delivering Naruto's words with the composure of a diplomat reading a treaty. I have one goal. Enemies of the Leaf Village will be eradicated. All of them. Permanently. The pigeon paused. I find blood in battle entertaining. Guy's smile didn't waver. Tears were still streaming down his face. Magnificent! A protector of the village. Your flames burn in a direction I have never seen before, and I respect it. Neji's lip curled slightly. Arrogant. The pigeon turned toward Neji. Accurate, it corrected. Tenten let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. She covered her mouth. Now then. Guy struck his pose again. Before we begin missions, I must see what you can do. Sparring. All four of you, show me your capabilities. Lee, you first. Then Neji. Then Tenten. And Naruto, you will finish. Lee demonstrated his taijutsu forms. They were excellent. Raw, committed, everything given with the intensity of a boy who had poured his entire identity into his fists and feet. Guy wept with pride. Neji demonstrated his gentle fist. 64 strikes on a training post, each one landing with the whisper crack of Tenketsu disruption. The post was useless afterward, its chakra-reinforced core completely neutralized. He walked back to the group without looking to see if anyone was impressed. Tenten unrolled her scroll. She launched 30 weapons in 12 seconds. Kunai, shuriken, senbon, a chain sickle that embedded itself in a training post 40 meters away with a thud that said she trained this throw 10,000 times. She gathered her weapons and returned. She was breathing hard but smiling. Then Guy turned to Naruto. Your turn, my youthful student. Show us what. Naruto was already walking forward. He had removed his hands from his pockets. His suit jacket remained buttoned. Hattori remained on his shoulder. He stopped in the center of the training field and turned to face the group. His eyes, blue, cold, with the faintest narrowing that made them look feline, swept across his teammates. Tenten, Hattori said. She straightened. Yeah? Attack me. She blinked. Then she grinned. Because someone telling Tenten to attack them was her absolute favorite sentence in any language. She unrolled her scroll and launched. 12 kunai in 2 seconds. Everyone aimed with the pinpoint accuracy of a girl who had thrown 100,000 blades in her life. Head, throat, heart, liver, kidneys, groin. Every kill zone covered. Naruto's body went limp, his spine curved. His shoulders dropped. His knees bent in ways that should have meant he was falling. But he didn't fall. He flowed. The first kunai passed a centimeter from his left ear. The second slid past his throat as his neck rolled sideways. The third and fourth went over his shoulders as his torso bent backward. The fifth, sixth, and seventh passed through the space where his chest had been as his entire body undulated like a flag in wind. 8, 9, 10, 11, each one finding empty air where flesh had been a millisecond before. The 12th kunai, aimed at his groin, passed between his legs as they shifted apart with the fluid grace of something boneless. Kamiye. Every kunai was embedded in the ground behind him. Naruto had dodged 12 projectiles without moving his feet. His shoes were in the exact same position they had been when Tenten launched her volley. His body straightened back to full posture as if a puppeteer had pulled his strings taut. Lee's jaw dropped. He didn't move his feet. He dodged everything without moving his feet. Neji's Byakugan flared. He was staring at Naruto's body with something approaching alarm. His muscles, they relaxed completely, total release of tension. His body achieved near zero resistance to airflow. It's like trying to hit smoke. Tenten was still grinning, but the grin had changed. It was wider now, hungrier. She reached for another scroll. Then Naruto vanished. 10 kicks against the ground in a single instant. The sound of his departure was a crack like a whip. One moment he was 20 meters away. The next moment he was directly in front of Tenten, close enough that she could see the individual threads of his tie. His right hand was raised, his index finger extended. The tip of his finger hovered 1 centimeter from the hollow of her throat, Shigan position. One thrust away from ending her, Tenten didn't flinch. That was the thing that separated her from every other person who had ever been on the receiving end of Naruto Uzumaki's speed. She looked at his finger. She looked at his face. She looked at his eyes. And in them, she saw something that was absolutely, unmistakably interested. "You rely on external steel," Naruto said. His own voice, from his own mouth, the first word she had ever heard in that deep, cold register that seemed to resonate in her chest cavity. "My body is the ultimate weapon." She should have been scared. She was fascinated. "Then teach me to dodge like that," she said. Without hesitation, without breaking eye contact, Naruto lowered his finger, his head tilted 1 degree to the left, the smallest possible acknowledgement, but from him it was a standing ovation. He turned and walked back to his position. Hattori cooed. Guy was crying a river. A literal river of tears streamed down his face. The flames of both of them, their youth burns in a way I have never." He was sobbing too hard to continue. Lee was punching the air. "I will train until I can move like that. Naruto-san, you are my rival." Neji said nothing, but his Byakugan was still active, and his hands, the hands of the Hyuga prodigy, the hands that had never met a defense they couldn't crack, were trembling at his sides. The weeks that followed compressed into a montage of training, D-rank missions, and the slow accumulation of something Naruto Uzumaki had never possessed in any life. People who chose to be near him. Lee challenged him to races every morning. Naruto won them all because Soru covered 100 meters before Lee's first step landed, but Lee never stopped asking. The gap was absurd and irrelevant. Lee didn't care about the gap. He cared about running. Naruto found this acceptable. Neji maintained his distance. He watched Naruto during training with the cataloging gaze of the Byakugan, filing away every movement, every technique, every impossible thing the suited boy performed with his bare hands. He never challenged Naruto directly. The Byakugan could see the truth of what Naruto was, and Neji's genius was smart enough to understand what he was seeing. Tenten started showing up to Naruto's personal training sessions. He trained alone every evening on a private section of Training Ground 9. 3 hours of Rokushiki repetition. Each technique performed 10,000 times until the number was arbitrary because the movement was existence. One evening she appeared at the edge of the clearing with a scroll on her back and a question in her eyes. Hattori looked at her. "You're here. You said your body is the ultimate weapon," Tenten said. "I want to understand what that means. My weapons are extensions of my arm. If I can read how your body moves, I can read how any weapon moves. Teach me to see it." Naruto considered this. The pigeon cooed. Naruto returned to his training without a word. She stayed. She watched. She came back the next evening. And the next, on the 4th evening, Naruto finished his Shigun repetitions, 10,000 finger thrusts into a reinforced post that was now riddled with holes deep enough to lose a hand in, and turned to face her. "Stand up," he said. His voice, short, final. She stood. "Attack me," he said. "When I dodge, watch where my weight shifts. That is where your next throw goes." It was the closest thing to an invitation he had ever issued to another human being. Tenten's grin could have lit the training ground. They trained together every evening after that. He never praised her. He never encouraged her. He would dodge her throws with Kamiye, and when she placed a blade in his path before he arrived there, reading his body, predicting his flow, he would give her that single small nod. One nod from Naruto Uzumaki was worth more than 1,000 compliments from anyone else. She collected them like treasures. The C-rank mission came 6 weeks after team formation. Guy presented it with his characteristic enthusiasm, an escort mission to the Land of Frost, protecting a political informant who was defecting from a minor lord's court to deliver intelligence to Konoha's archives. Standard extraction, standard protection detail, standard everything. It was absolutely going to be standard nothing. The Land of Frost lived up to its name. Snow covered every surface. The trees were skeletal. The wind cut through layers of clothing with the persistence of a blade. Lee wore 3 jumpsuits layered over each other. Neji had a fur-lined coat. Tenten was wrapped in thermal gear with hand warmers in every pocket. Naruto wore his suit, his usual suit, black wool, white shirt, slim tie. The pigeon on his shoulder had puffed itself into a perfect sphere against the cold. "Naruto-san?" Lee's teeth were chattering. "Are you okay? It is very cold. Your flames of youth must burn incredibly hot to resist." "I'm fine," Hattori said. "The pigeon is fine too!" Lee screamed into the blizzard. "Incredible," Guy laughed his booming laugh. "My student's body is conditioned beyond the reach of mere weather. His muscles generate their own heat through density alone. This is what hard work achieves." Tenten pulled her scarf higher and looked at Naruto sideways. "You're really not cold?" The pigeon turned its head to face her. "My body operates at a core temperature that renders external climate irrelevant." She snorted. "Show off." The faintest twitch at the corner of Naruto's mouth. The smallest possible ghost of something that might have been amusement if you were looking for it and knew where to find it. Tenten was looking for it. She found it. Their informant was a nervous man named Takeda, thin, twitchy, sweating despite the cold. He talked too much and said too little. He kept glancing at Naruto as if the boy in the suit was more frightening than whatever he was running from. Given what was waiting ahead, his priorities were understandable but misplaced. The ambush came on the 3rd day. They entered a valley between 2 frozen ridgelines. The snow was deeper here. The trees were thicker. The wind died to nothing, an absence of sound that any experienced shinobi recognized as wrong. The world was holding its breath. Guy stopped walking. His smile vanished. For the first time in 6 weeks of team interaction, Naruto saw the man behind the comedy, the elite Junin, the taijutsu master, the man who stood toe-to-toe with Kakashi Hake and asked for rematches. Guy's posture shifted from exuberant to lethal in a single heartbeat. "We're surrounded," Guy said. The trees erupted with bodies. 50 of them. Ice 9 mercenaries wearing frost-white armor and carrying weapons that glowed with chakra-infused cold. They poured from the ridgelines on both sides, dropping from branches, rising from snowdrifts, closing the valley into a cage of blades and killing intent. Their commander dropped from the largest tree, a massive man with a frozen war axe and ice crystals growing from his skin. "The informant," he growled. "Hand him over or die in this valley, all of you." Guy's grin returned. It was a different grin, the grin of a predator being given permission. "Lee, Neji, protect Takeda-san." Guy's voice carried the authority of absolute command. "Tenten, support position. Naruto." "I know," Naruto said, his own voice. The room, the valley, adjusted. Guy locked eyes with the mercenary commander and vanished. The 2 titans collided somewhere above the tree line, the shockwave of their first exchange sending a cascade of snow avalanching down the ridgeline. That was Guy's fight. This, the 49 remaining mercenaries closing in on 4 genin and a terrified informant, was everyone else's problem. Neji activated his Byakugan and dropped into gentle fist stance. Lee unwrapped his leg weights with a look of absolute focus. Tenten unfurled her primary scroll. They were ready to fight through attrition, through exhaustion, through blood and sweat and the accumulated skill of their training. Naruto stepped forward. He adjusted his tie. The mercenaries saw a child in a suit, a child with a pigeon on his shoulder who was adjusting his tie in the middle of a combat zone like he was checking his reflection before a dinner party. Several of them laughed. One of them made a joke about executing the little gentleman first. "You exist as enemies of the leaf," Naruto said. His voice carried across the valley with the weight of a headstone. "Therefore, your mere existence is a sin." He reached up and touched Hattori. The pigeon lifted off his shoulder and flew to Tenten's position. It landed on her scroll and cooed once. Naruto straightened his cuffs. Geppo. He kicked the air. The snow beneath his feet exploded outward in a ring as the force of 10 compressed kicks launched him skyward. He rose above the valley floor, 10 meters, 20, 30, and hung there suspended in the frozen air, a black figure silhouetted against the gray winter sky. The mercenaries looked up. 49 faces, 49 expressions of confusion transitioning to alarm. Naruto swung his right leg. Rankyaku. The compressed air blade that left his leg was 30 meters wide. It screamed through the atmosphere with a sound like the world being torn in half. a howling, ripping crescendo that turned the falling snow in its path to steam. It descended on the front line of mercenaries with the inevitability of a natural disaster. 15 men were cut in half. The compressed wind blade carved through the frozen ground after passing through them, splitting the valley floor for 100 meters behind where they had stood. Trees on both sides of the cut toppled sideways. The snow, in a 50-meter radius, evaporated. The mercenaries who had been standing in the second and third ranks were thrown backward by the shockwave alone, bodies ragdolling through the air like they had been hit by an invisible freight train. Neiji's Byakugan saw all of it in perfect clarity. His mouth opened. Words refused to form. Lee was crying. "Beautiful!" he screamed. "The most beautiful attack I have ever!" Tenten watched the pigeon on her scroll. Then she looked up at the boy hanging in the sky. Then she looked at the carnage below him. The pigeon cooed. The mercenaries panicked. 34 remained standing. They launched everything they had upward. Ice jutsu, explosive tags, kunai storms, a combined barrage of frozen projectiles that filled the sky with a deadly rain aimed at the suited figure hovering above them. Naruto dropped. Tekai. His body hardened. Every muscle, every fiber, every cell compressed into density that turned his flesh into something beyond steel. The explosive tags detonated against his torso and did nothing. The ice jutsu shattered against his skin like glass thrown at a mountain. Kunai bounced off his forearms and spun away into the snow. He fell through the barrage like a meteor through paper, untouched, unmarked, descending toward the ground with the inevitability of gravity's favorite child. He landed in the center of the remaining mercenary formation. The impact cratered the frozen earth. 2 mercenaries within arm's reach were thrown off their feet by the shockwave of his arrival alone. Naruto straightened from his landing crouch. Soru. He vanished. He appeared behind the first mercenary, his index finger already driving forward. Shigen. His finger punched through the man's back armor, through his spine, and out the other side. The mercenary was dead before his brain registered pain. Naruto withdrew his finger and vanished again. Shigen. Another through the throat. Another through the temple. He moved through them like a blade through smoke, appearing, striking, vanishing, appearing somewhere else, his finger finding hearts and spines and skulls with the consistency of a machine performing its intended function. Each kill was a single thrust. Each transition was Soru, the crack of 10 compressed kicks sending him to the next target before the previous one had finished falling. Tenten was watching. She had lowered her scroll. There was nothing to support, nothing to cover. She was watching a 12-year-old boy dismantle a military force with one finger, and the thing that kept catching her attention, the thing that made her breath stop, was how clean it was. Every motion served a purpose. Every kill was a single movement. His body wasted nothing. It was the most perfect expression of combat she had ever seen, and she had spent her entire life studying weapons. He was better than any weapon she had ever held. Naruto appeared in front of the last 5 mercenaries. They were trying to run. He stood between them in the tree line. His suit had a single drop of blood on the left lapel. Hattori's absence from his shoulder made him look strangely incomplete, a frame missing its signature detail. Rank Yaku. His legs swept horizontally at waist level. The compressed air blade decapitated all 5 simultaneously. Their bodies fell in unison. Silence returned to the valley. The snow began to fall again, drifting down onto a field of bodies and frozen blood. Naruto reached up and adjusted his tie. His breathing was even. His heart rate was resting. 49 kills in 43 seconds. Guy dropped from the sky moments later, his opponent's unconscious body over one shoulder. He landed in the valley, looked around at the devastation, and his eyes went wide. "Naruto," Guy whispered. It might have been the only time in his life that Maito Guy whispered. Hattori flew back from Tenten's position and landed on Naruto's shoulder. The pigeon settled its feathers. Cooed once, Lee was kneeling in the snow, openly sobbing. "I will train 10,000 times harder," he managed between heaving breaths, "until my fists can do what his body does." Neji deactivated his Byakugan and leaned against a tree. His face was blank, but his hands were shaking. He had watched every kill with perfect vision. He had seen the finger puncture flesh, the speed that made Soru look like teleportation, the compressed wind blade that carved the earth. The Byakugan saw everything, and everything it saw was telling Neji Hyuga that fate had placed him on a team with something that existed in a category he couldn't reach. His destiny speech was cracking at the foundation. Tenten approached Naruto as the team regrouped. She stopped in front of him and looked at the blood drop on his lapel. She reached into her pouch, pulled out a cleaning cloth, and dabbed it away. Naruto watched her do this. He allowed it. The cloth came away red. Tenten folded it, tucked it back in her pouch, and met his eyes. "Nice suit," she said. "Would be ashamed to ruin it." The ghost was there again, the phantom twitch at his mouth's corner. "I have 7 more, Hattori informed her. She laughed, a real laugh, short and bright and warm in the frozen air. "Of course you do." The informant was delivered. The mission was completed. The report was filed with enough redaction that the Hokage himself had to read between the black lines to understand the scope of what Naruto had done. Hiruzen read it. He set down his pipe. He looked out the window at the village he had sworn to protect. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out the file marked Uzumaki in. Capabilities Assessment. He crossed out the current threat level designation and wrote a new one. He wrote it in red ink. The Chunin exams were announced 3 months after the Land of Frost mission. Guy nominated his team without hesitation. The Hokage approved the nomination with the private understanding that placing Naruto Uzumaki in the Chunin exams was less about testing his abilities and more about giving the village leadership a controlled environment in which to observe what he could do against varied opponents. The forest of death smelled like decay and old growth, and the distant copper of things dying in the underbrush. Massive trees blocked the sun. The canopy was so thick that noon looked like twilight on the forest floor. Teams entered from gates spaced around the perimeter, each carrying one of 2 scrolls, each tasked with obtaining the other and reaching the central tower within 5 days. Team Guy entered from Gate 7. Yosh! Lee's enthusiasm was completely undiminished by the oppressive atmosphere. "We will complete this challenge in record time with our combined youth." "Lee," Hattori said. "Focus." Lee saluted the pigeon. "Hi, Hattori-san." Neji activated his Byakugan and swept the surrounding forest. 3 teams within 500 meters, 2 moving away, 1 stationary, waiting. "Ambush?" Tenten asked, her hand already on her scroll. "Likely," Neji confirmed. Naruto began walking. He didn't consult. He didn't strategize. He moved toward the central tower with the directness of an apex predator who understood that the forest was his territory and every other team within it was prey that hadn't been processed yet. His team followed. Because when Naruto Uzumaki started walking, you followed or you got left behind. There was no third option. They acquired their second scroll within the first hour. The Rain Village team that had been carrying it was still conscious when Team Guy departed. Naruto had allowed Lee to handle that engagement, and Lee's enthusiasm had left them bruised, beaten, and scrollless, but breathing. Naruto watched Lee fight with something approaching approval. The boy's commitment to overwhelming physical force was respectable. With both scrolls secured, Team Guy moved toward the tower. They moved fast. Lee's speed, Neji's reconnaissance, Tenten's ranged coverage, and Naruto at the center of the formation doing something far more important than navigating. He was hunting. His nose, enhanced by the leopard blood that ran through every cell, caught the scent of something wrong in the forest. Something that smelled like snakes and ambition and the particular chemical signature of someone who had been dead and refused to accept it. Orochimaru was in this forest. Naruto could smell him. The Sannin was here for the Uchiha. Naruto knew this because intelligence gathering was a function of being a weapon, and weapons that operated without information were blunt instruments. He filed it. It was relevant, but not his current concern. His current concern was the 3 chakra signatures converging on Sasuke Uchiha's position from the northeast. Sound Village operatives, moving with purpose, carrying killing intent that tasted like copper in the air. Naruto stopped walking. "Go ahead to the tower," Hattori said. The pigeon looked at Tenten. "There is something I must address." Tenten frowned. "What?" "The sound team is moving to eliminate the Uchiha," Naruto said, his own voice. The team went still. When Naruto spoke with his own mouth, it meant the situation had weight. "This forest has rules. I enforce them." Guy would have protested, but Guy had his own concerns. He was operating as a proctor observer for this exam phase and was stationed at the tower. This was a genin exercise. The genin were expected to handle their own problems. Naruto's problems just happened to be other people's entire teams. Be safe, Tenten said. It was automatic. It left her mouth before she processed that saying, be safe, to Naruto Uzumaki was like telling the ocean to stay wet. Hattori cooed. Naruto vanished. Soru. He crossed 2 kilometers of forest in 6 seconds. Each kickoff shattered the branch beneath his feet and launched him forward with a sonic crack that startled birds from the canopy in his wake. He arrived at the clearing where Sasuke Uchiha's team was camped, just as the Sound Three made their entrance. Dosu Kinuta stood at the edge of the clearing, his resonating arm device humming with stored acoustic energy. Zaku Abumi flanked him to the right, both air pressure cannons already aimed. Kintsuchi covered the left with her Senbon bells, Genjutsu delivery devices concealed as weapons. Sasuke was on the ground, exhausted. The curse mark on his neck pulsed with an angry purple light. His teammates, Sakura and Sai, stood between him and the Sound team with the posture of people who knew they were outmatched and had chosen to stand anyway. The Uchiha, Dosu said. Lord Orochimaru's orders are absolute. Hand him over or we go through you. Either way. A pigeon landed on a branch above the clearing. Everyone looked up. Cool, said Hattori. Then Naruto was there, standing at the center of the clearing, between the Sound team and Sasuke's group, hands in his pockets, suit immaculate, his blonde hair pulled tight, his eyes half-lidded with something that looked, from certain angles, like boredom. Dosu's eye widened behind his bandages. Who, a leaf genin, Zaku said, grinning. Wandered into the wrong fight, kid. Nice suit, though. Hate to get blood on. To be weak is a sin, Naruto said. Zaku's grin faltered. There was something in that voice, that deep, cold, absolute voice coming from a 12-year-old frame, that bypassed the higher brain functions and spoke directly to the survival instinct buried in the medulla. What did you just... Zaku raised his palm cannons. Chakra compressed in the tubes. He fired. The decapitating airwaves erupted from both palms, twin columns of compressed wind with enough force to shatter stone walls and turn trees into splinters. They hit the space where Naruto had been standing. Naruto was no longer standing there. Soru. He was behind Zaku. His left hand was closing around the back of Zaku's skull. His grip compressed with strength that cracked the bone beneath his palm before Zaku's brain could send the signal to turn around. Naruto's right hand rose, index finger extended. Shigan. His finger drove forward into the side of Zaku's throat, a specific targeted strike. It punched through flesh, found the vocal cords, and destroyed them with the precision of a surgeon's blade. One thrust. In and out. Zaku's mouth opened for a scream that would never come. He crumpled forward, hands clutching his ruined throat, alive but silenced permanently. Naruto released his skull and let him fall. Dosu took a step backward. His resonating arm was vibrating at maximum frequency. You? What are you? Kin was already running. Her feet were carrying her away from the clearing before her conscious mind made the decision. The survival instinct had taken over completely. She was in a forest with something that hunted, and she understood this truth in the marrow of her bones. Dosu looked at his fleeing teammate. He looked at the boy in the suit. He looked at Zaku writhing on the ground, voiceless, the small, precise wound in his throat leaking a thin stream of red. Dosu ran. Naruto watched them go. He could catch them. Soru would close the distance before they reached the next tree. But they were already broken. Their mission was compromised. Their team was functionally destroyed, and the terror they would carry back to the Sound Village would serve as a more effective message than their corpses. He turned. Sakura was staring at him with her hands over her mouth. Sai's expression was unreadable, but his drawing brush was trembling in his grip. Sasuke, propped up on one elbow, curse mark still pulsing, was looking at Naruto with an expression that was equal parts fury and something dangerously close to respect. You, Sasuke managed. His voice was ragged, the one with the pigeon. Hattori descended from the branch and landed on Naruto's shoulder. The pigeon cooed. Your enemies are handled, Hattori said. Rest. You have an exam to pass. Naruto turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Soru carried him back to his team's position in seconds, the forest blurring around him, branches splintering in his wake. He arrived at the rendezvous point where Tenten, Lee, and Neji were waiting. Lee was doing push-ups, Neji was meditating, Tenten was sharpening a kunai. She looked up the moment he appeared, her eyes tracking him with a concern that she would deny if asked about it. "Done?" she asked. "Done," Hattori confirmed. She stood up. Her eyes swept over him, checking for damage, for injury, for any sign that whatever he had handled him back. She found a thin cut on his left cheek, a graze from one of Zaku's compressed wind blasts, the only mark the Sound Genin had managed to leave. Tenten reached into her pouch. She pulled out a small adhesive bandage. She stepped close to Naruto, into his space, into the radius that other people avoided instinctively, and pressed the bandage over the cut. Her fingers lingered on his cheek for 1 second longer than necessary. Naruto looked at her. His blue eyes met her brown ones. The feline narrowing was gone. For one moment, his eyes were just eyes. A boy's eyes. Looking at a girl who had touched him with something other than a weapon, he gave her one nod. From Naruto Uzumaki, that nod carried more weight than a love letter. Tenten knew this. She smiled, smiling genuine and warm, and stepped back. "Tower's that way," she said, pointing. They reached the tower within the hour. The preliminary rounds of the Chunin exams took place in a vast concrete arena beneath the tower. The ceiling was high. The walls were reinforced. Observation platforms lined both sides, packed with Junin, the Hokage, and the Genin teams whose members were waiting for their names to appear on the randomized match board. The board flickered. Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Hyuga. Lee made a strangled noise that was half excitement and half terror. Teammates! They matched teammates! Guy's expression was complicated. His arms were crossed. His jaw was set. He looked at Naruto, standing with his hands in his pockets, Hattori on his shoulder, face blank, and then at Neji, standing with his arms folded, Byakugan already active, chin raised in challenge. "This," Guy murmured, "will be educational." The two combatants walked to the arena floor. Neji moved first, dropping into his gentle fist stance, feet shoulder width, palms forward, chakra gathering at his fingertips. His white eyes locked onto Naruto's frame with the all-seeing gaze of the Hyuga bloodline. "Fate has arranged this," Neji said. His voice carried across the arena with the arrogance of absolute certainty. "You were born with power you did not earn. It was given to you, by blood, by birth, by a destiny you cannot comprehend. I have watched you train. I have seen what your body can do. It is impressive, but it is unearned. You are a weapon forged by forces beyond your control, walking a path laid out for you before your first breath." Naruto said nothing. Hattori was silent. Neji continued. "Destiny determines all things. The strong are strong because it was fated. The weak are weak because they were born to lose. I was born to see the truth of all things. My eyes cannot be deceived, cannot be avoided, cannot be overcome. This match was decided the moment our names appeared together." He pointed at Naruto. "You will fall, because fate demands it." Naruto removed his suit jacket. The arena went silent. The gesture was small, a boy taking off his coat, but it carried a weight that pressed down on every observer. He folded the jacket once and held it out to his right. Hattori took the collar in his beak and flew to the observation platform, landing beside Tenten, who accepted the jacket without thinking. Naruto stood in his white dress shirt and black tie. He unbuttoned his cuffs and rolled his sleeves to his elbows. The muscles of his forearms were visible now, corded, dense, carved with a definition that belonged on a man 3 times his age. He raised one hand and loosened his tie by a single centimeter. "I simply find blood in battle to be entertaining," Naruto said, his voice cold, final, carrying across the arena like a door slamming shut. "Your eyes are a crutch for your fragile ego." Neji's face contorted. The insult landed like a shigun to the pride. "You dare! Begin," said the proctor. Neji exploded forward. His gentle fist was a masterwork, the accumulated technique of the greatest Hyuga prodigy in a generation. Every strike aimed at a tenketsu point, every palm charged with chakra disruption. He was fast. He was accurate. He was everything the Hyuga clan had ever promised. He struck and struck and struck. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. The first strike hit Naruto's chest. The second hit his shoulder. The third hit his abdomen. Neji's hands were a blur, a waterfall of palm strikes descending on Naruto's torso with the relentless inevitability of rain. 4, 8, 16, 32. Each one landing with the sound of flesh on flesh, each one targeted at a tenketsu point. Each one delivered with enough chakra disruption to shut down a grown man's network. Naruto stood still. He absorbed every single strike without moving his feet. His hands remained at his sides. His face remained blank. He took 32 palm strikes from the greatest Hyuga prodigy alive and stood there like a wall receiving a light breeze. The observation platform was silent. Kakashi Hatake's visible eye was wide. Kurenai Yuhi's hand was over her mouth. Asuma Sarutobi's cigarette fell from his lips. Neji was panting. His hands were pain. White hot, screaming pain radiating from every finger on both hands. He looked down. 3 of his fingers were bent at wrong angles. 2 more were swelling. The bones in his palms were vibrating with fracture lines. He hadn't activated Tekai. That was the thing that broke Neji's mind. The realization that shattered every word he had spoken about destiny and fate and earned power. Naruto Uzumaki's resting musculature, his baseline, his idle state, his body as it existed when he was doing absolutely nothing, was denser than Neji's maximum output palm strikes could penetrate. Neji didn't hit an iron defense. He hit a person whose body was already harder than his attacks could process, without trying, without even acknowledging the hits were landing. Your destiny, Naruto said, is what you are too weak to change. Neji screamed. It was rage and pain and the sound of a worldview crumbling. He threw himself forward. One last desperate combination. His broken hands driving forward through the agony, the 8 trigrams gate opening behind his feet as he committed everything he had left. Naruto shifted his stance. Both fists came together at waist level, his elbows tucked, his shoulders squared, his feet planted at shoulder width. The stance was low, grounded, ancient, something that had been perfected in a different world by a man who used it to kill gods. He drove both fists forward. Rokuogan. They pressed against Neji's chest. The shockwave was invisible. It entered Neji's body through the point of contact and expanded outward through his internal systems like a bomb detonating inside a closed room. It bypassed his skin. It bypassed his muscles. It bypassed every external defense a human body possessed and went straight for the architecture underneath. The bones, the organs, the nervous system, the delicate network of chakra pathways that the Byakugan relied upon to function. Neji's eyes went wide. The veins around his Byakugan bulged once, and then flattened. The white eyes lost their glow. The all-seeing gaze extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. His body left the ground. He flew backwards 7 meters and hit the arena wall with a sound like a bag of gravel being thrown against concrete. He slid down the wall and crumpled to the floor. He didn't get up. His Byakugan was deactivated. His hands were broken. His internal chakra network was in complete disruption. He was breathing, shallow, pained, alive. But the match was over. It had never begun. The proctor stood frozen for 3 full seconds before remembering his job. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. The arena was silent, then Lee screamed. Incredible, the power, the absolute. He was crying and punching the air simultaneously. Naruto-san, your flames of youth. Guy was crying. He was always crying, but this was different. These were tears of recognition. He had just watched a 12-year-old execute a technique that surpassed anything in his own arsenal, and he was weeping because he understood what he was witnessing. Kakashi leaned toward Asuma. What was that technique? His voice was barely audible. Asuma shook his head. I don't know, but whatever it was, it went through Neji like he wasn't there. The Byakugan didn't even see it coming. Kurenai was staring at Naruto as he walked back to the observation platform. That boy is 12 years old, she whispered. 12. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat in the Hokage's observation box with his pipe unlit in his hand. He watched Naruto walk up the stairs with the unhurried pace of someone who had never been in danger and never would be. He watched the pigeon land on the boy's shoulder. He watched Tenten hand back the suit jacket and say something that made the pigeon coo. The old man's hand tightened on his pipe. He had built a weapon. The weapon was exceeding every parameter he had set. And for the first time in 50 years of leading this village, Hiruzen Sarutobi was uncertain whether that was a blessing or a problem. Tenten handed Naruto his jacket. Her fingers brushed his as he took it. "You could have ended that faster," she said. Hattori cooed. "I wanted him to understand," the pigeon said. "Destiny is a word for people who refuse to train harder." Tenten held his gaze for one beat longer than was necessary. Then she looked away, back to the arena floor where the medical team was loading Neji onto a stretcher. "He's your teammate," she said. "He needed to learn," Naruto said. His own voice. Tenten looked back at him. There was something in his tone, the faintest reduction of cold, the smallest thaw, that told her this was not cruelty. It was education. Brutal, permanent education delivered in the only language Neji would accept. She understood. She nodded once. Naruto put his jacket back on. He adjusted his tie. Hattori settled on his shoulder. The exam continued. Other matches happened. They were irrelevant. The invasion came 2 weeks later. Orochimaru's forces struck during the final round of the Chunin exams, sound and sand flooding the streets of Konoha, giant snakes crashing through the outer walls, the barrier rising around the Hokage's rooftop as the third and his wayward student faced each other for the final time. It was chaos. It was war. It was 100 things happening at once. Naruto's role in the invasion was simple, direct, and devastating. He moved through the streets of Konoha like a leopard through a herd of sheep. Soru carried him from engagement to engagement. Shigan ended each one in a single strike. When clusters of enemies gathered, Rankyaku scattered them. The compressed air blades cutting through buildings and bodies with equal indifference. He did not save the village alone. Guy was there. Kakashi was there. The entire Junin force was mobilized. But Naruto's section of the village, the orphan district, the civilian sector, the places where the defenseless lived, was silent by the end of the first hour. Every Sannin who entered his territory left it as a corpse. The residents of those streets would later tell stories about a boy in a black suit who moved faster than their eyes could follow, whose pigeon watched from the rooftops while he worked below, who left nothing alive that wore a hostile headband. The invasion ended. The third Hokage fell. The village grieved. Naruto attended the funeral in his black suit. Hattori was on his shoulder. He stood at the back of the crowd, separated from the mass of mourners by a radius of empty space that formed around him wherever he went. People stepped away from Naruto Uzumaki without deciding to. Their bodies made the choice for them. Tenten found him after the service. She walked through the empty space without hesitation and stood beside him. Their shoulders were close. She didn't speak. He didn't speak. Hattori was silent. They stood together in the rain and watched the smoke rise from the memorial pyre. Whatever they were to each other, whatever this quiet, fierce thing was that had been growing between them since the day she threw 12 kunai and he dodged them all without moving his feet, it existed in moments like this, in proximity, in choosing to be present, in the fact that she walked toward him when the rest of the world walked away. The weeks after the invasion were reconstruction, new Hokage selection, political reshuffling. The village was wounded and healing. Missions continued because missions always continued. The economy of the shinobi world did not pause for grief. Then Sasuke Uchiha defected. The news came at dawn. A border patrol had spotted the Sound Four, Orochimaru's elite bodyguards, moving north through fire country with a coffin-sized barrel carried between them. Intelligence confirmed the barrel contained Sasuke Uchiha, undergoing forced evolution through the Cursed Seal's final stage. He had left willingly. He had made his choice. But the village did not accept the loss of its last Uchiha without a fight. The retrieval team was assembled. Shikamaru Nara led a squad of Genin toward the primary Sound 4 route, a distraction force, a delay action, a group of brave idiots who would throw themselves at Orochimaru's elites and buy time. The real extraction unit was Team Guy. Guy himself was on another mission, S rank, unavailable, unreachable. His team received the deployment order directly from the new Hokage's office. Lee, Neji, recently recovered from his Rokugan-induced hospitalization and profoundly changed in his outlook, and Tenten suited up within minutes. Naruto was already in his suit. He was always in his suit. They moved at speed through the forest bordering fire country. Naruto's nose, the leopard's nose, the predator's nose, tracked the Sound 4's chemical signature through the trees. They were moving fast. Their escorts were powerful. One signature in particular made Naruto's eyes narrow to feline slits: Kimimaro Kaguya, the last of the Kaguya clan. Orochimaru's perfect soldier, a man whose bones were weapons, whose body was a fortress, whose loyalty was absolute and unquestioning. He had been deployed as the final line of defense, the fail-safe. The guarantee that even if the Sound 4 fell, the barrel and its contents would reach Orochimaru. Team Guy caught them at the border. The Sound 4 had already been engaged by Shikamaru's squad, scattered across multiple battlefields, each locked in their own desperate fights. The barrel was ahead, carried by a single figure who moved through the trees with the fluid grace of someone whose skeleton was a weapon. Naruto stopped on a high branch. His team landed behind him. Below, in a clearing at the forest's edge, Kimimaro set down the barrel and turned to face their approach. He sensed them. Of course he sensed them. His body was a seismic network of bone vibration. Every footstep within 100 meters registered on his skeleton like a tuning fork. "Go," Naruto said, his own voice. The team looked at him. "Take the barrel. Retrieve the Uchiha. Leave this one to me." "Naruto," Tenten started. He looked at her. One look. His blue eyes held hers for 1 second. And in that second, he said everything he would never put into words, that he was coming back, that this was what he was made for, that she was the reason he returned from fights instead of simply fighting until the next one found him. She clenched her jaw. She nodded. "Lee, Neji, go." She gave the order because someone had to, and because she understood that Naruto's fights were his alone. "Circle around. I'll be right behind you." Lee hesitated for half a second. Then he went. Neji followed, his white eyes casting one last look back at the boy who had broken his worldview and rebuilt it into something stronger. Then they were gone, moving through the canopy toward the barrel, leaving Naruto alone on the branch above the clearing. Tenten lingered for one breath. "Come back," she said. "Cool," said Hattori. She went. Naruto dropped from the branch. He landed in the clearing with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Hattori left his shoulder and flew to a high branch. The pigeon always departed before the real violence began, and Naruto was grateful for this, because what was about to happen was going to be excessive. Kimimaro Kaguya stood 15 meters away. He was shirtless despite the cold. His skin was pale, deathly pale, the pallor of a man whose blood carried a disease that was eating him alive. Green eyes regarded Naruto with the flat assessment of a fellow weapon. "You should have gone with your friends," Kimimaro said. His voice was empty, hollow. The voice of a man who had poured everything he was into service and had nothing left for himself. "I am Lord Orochimaru's ultimate shield. Nothing passes through me." Naruto reached up and loosened his tie. He pulled it over his head and folded it once, hanging it on a low branch beside him. He unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. He rolled his sleeves to his elbows. "And I am the ultimate spear of dark justice," Naruto said. Kimimaro's green eyes widened fractionally. There was something in this boy's voice, in his posture, in the absolute absence of doubt, that registered on Kimimaro's internal threat assessment as a level he had only ever encountered in one other person, his lord. "Then we understand each other," Kimimaro said. A bone slid from his palm, long, white, curved like a sword. He gripped it and shifted into his first stance. "Begin." Naruto shifted his weight forward. Tsuruhi vanished. The branch beneath him shattered from the force of 10 compressed kicks. He appeared in front of Kimimaro. A gap of 15 meters closed in less time than it took to blink. His right fist already driving forward with the weight of his entire Rokushiki-enhanced body behind it. Kimimaro's bone sword swept upward to intercept. The two forces met with a crack that split the air. Naruto's fist against Kimimaro's blade. The bone held. The Kaguya bloodline produced calcium structures denser than steel, but the shockwave of impact launched debris and dust in a ring around them. Kimimaro's feet carved trenches in the earth. He was pushed back 3 meters. His eyes went sharp. This was real strength. This was genuine. Interesting. Kimimaro breathed, and for the first time in years, something moved behind those empty green eyes. "You hit like a hurricane." Naruto pressed forward. Soru again. 10 kicks, vanish, appear behind. Shigan to the spine. Kimimaro's body was already spinning, a bone lance erupting from his shoulder blade to intercept, and Naruto's finger struck bone instead of flesh. The Shigan punched into the bone 3 inches deep and stopped. Kimimaro used the rotation to drive an elbow blade toward Naruto's throat. Kami-e. Naruto's body went limp, the blade passing through the space his neck occupied a millisecond ago, his spine bending at an angle that should have been anatomically impossible. They separated. 3 meters of distance. Dance of the Willow, Kimimaro murmured, and his body erupted. Bones extended from every joint, elbows, knees, shoulders, wrists, spine. He became a moving forest of blades, each one rotating and thrusting and sweeping with a precision that turned his entire body into a weapon system. He charged. Naruto met him head-on. Tekai. The bones struck his forearms, his chest, his thighs, and shattered. They broke against his hardened musculature like glass rods thrown at a wall. Kimimaro's eyes went wide as his attacks. Attacks that had pierced through shinobi armor, that had killed Junin-level opponents, that represented the apex of his clan's genocide-worthy Kekkei Genkai, bounced off a 12-year-old's body. Naruto drove forward through the Willow Barrage. His right hand seized Kimimaro's throat. His left hand drove forward. Shigan. Finger through the shoulder. Clean through. Kimimaro's left arm went limp as the nerve cluster was destroyed. Naruto released his throat and stepped back. Kimimaro staggered. Blood ran from the shoulder wound. His left arm hung useless at his side. His breathing was heavier. The disease in his blood was screaming at him. His lungs burning, his heart straining, his body fighting on 2 fronts. But Kimimaro Kaguya was Lord Orochimaru's shield. He did not fall. He would never fall. He would break every bone in his body and stack the fragments as a wall before he allowed an enemy to pass. Dance of the Clematis, Kimimaro said. His voice was still empty, still hollow. His spine extended, a massive drill of interlocking bone segments erupting from his back and wrapping around his remaining arm. It was enormous, a weapon the size of a tree trunk, spiraling to a point, rotating with enough force to bore through mountains. His curse mark activated. The transformation was grotesque and awesome in equal measure. His skin darkened, his skull elongated, his body expanded, 6 feet becoming 7, then 8. His proportions shifting towards something prehistoric and terrible. Bone plates erupted across his skin like armor. His eyes turned yellow. His teeth became fangs. Curse mark level 2. The dinosaur. He looked like extinction walking. He charged. The Clematis drill drove forward with the force of a tectonic event. The ground split beneath his feet. Trees were uprooted by the wind pressure alone. He aimed everything, every remaining ounce of his dying body, every fragment of his devotion, at the boy in the white shirt. Naruto watched him come. Then Naruto changed. It started at his hands. Spots erupted across his skin. Golden circles on a field of yellow-white fur that spread from his fingers to his wrists to his forearms. His body expanded. 12 years old and already lean, he became something else entirely. His shoulders widened, his chest deepened, his spine lengthened and curved. A tail erupted from the base of his spine, long, thick, whipping the air with enough force to crater the ground where it struck. His face changed last. The jaw extended. The teeth grew. His ears migrated upward and became pointed, tufted with spotted fur. His eyes, already feline, already predatory, went fully golden, fully vertical, fully inhuman. 8 feet of leopard hybrid form stood in the clearing. The transformation was complete in 2 seconds. The bloodlust that radiated from his body was a physical force, a weight that pressed down on the surrounding forest, that bent branches away from him, that made the air itself feel thicker. Kimimaro, mid-charge, felt it hit him like a wall. His body wanted to stop. Every survival instinct his dying form still possessed was screaming at him to turn around. He didn't stop. He couldn't. He was the shield. He was absolute. The drill reached Naruto. Soru. At hybrid output, Soru was something beyond speed. It was a violation of physics. Naruto's massive leopard body, 8 feet of spotted muscle and killing intent, vanished from existence and reappeared beneath Kimimaro's guard. Inside the arc of the drill, close enough to smell the death on Kimimaro's breath, his tail wrapped around Kimimaro's waist. The grip was absolute, a constrictor's hold, a force that Kimimaro's dying body could not break regardless of how many bones he produced. The drill swung wild, missing, its momentum carrying it past Naruto's shoulder as the hybrid form locked the Kaguya in place. Kimimaro looked into the golden eyes 3 inches from his face. He saw his death looking back. Naruto's massive clawed hands pressed against Kimimura's chest, both fists, zero range, the same stance he had used on Neji, scaled up to 8 feet of hybrid muscle. Saidorin, Rokuogan. Maximum yield, the shockwave was visible this time. A distortion in the air, a ripple in reality, a sphere of pure internal force that expanded outward from Naruto's fists and passed through Kimimura's body like a stone through paper. It entered his chest and exited his back and kept going, the residual force lancing outward into the forest behind them, into the ground below them, into the air above them. The trees behind Kimimura exploded, the ground split. A trench carved itself into the earth, a mile-long wound in the planet, 10 meters wide and 20 meters deep, extending from the point of impact to the horizon. The forest on either side of the trench toppled, ancient trees falling like dominoes in both directions. The sound of their collapse rolling across the landscape like thunder. Kimimura's eyes went blank. Every bone in his body shattered simultaneously. Every organ ruptured. Every nerve died. The last Kaguya's internal architecture ceased to exist in a single instant. Reduced from a living weapon to a bag of disconnected fragments by a force that treated the human body as an inconvenience rather than an obstacle, Naruto released him. The tail unwound. Kimimura's body fell with the boneless finality of something that was never getting up again. He hit the ruined earth and lay still. His curse mark receded. His transformation reversed. In death, he looked small. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who had finally been relieved of his duty. Naruto's hybrid form began to compress. Seimei Kikan, Kaijo. The spots receded. The mass reduced. 8 feet became 5. The tail retracted. The claws withdrew. The golden eyes rounded back to blue. In 10 seconds, a boy in a white dress shirt stood where a monster had been. His blonde hair was loose. The tie that held it had snapped during the transformation. It fell around his face in unruly spikes. Hattori descended from his branch and landed on Naruto's shoulder. The pigeon cooed once. Naruto breathed. His eyes found the trench, a mile long, cut through the forest like a wound that would never heal. Trees still falling at the far end, seconds behind the shockwave that had knocked them loose. He turned. Tenten was standing at the edge of the clearing. She had doubled back. Of course she had doubled back. Because Tenten would always double back for him. Because she was the one person in the world who ran toward the sound of his violence instead of away from it. She saw him first. The boy with the loose hair and the pigeon and the rolled up sleeves, standing at the edge of a trench that stretched to the horizon. She saw the body on the ground. She saw the devastation. She understood the scale of what had just happened. And she walked toward him anyway. She walked through the ruined clearing. She stepped over shattered wood and torn earth. She crossed the distance between them with steps that were steady and sure and absolute in their intention. She stopped in front of him. His eyes met hers. She hugged him. Her arms went around his waist, and she pulled herself against his chest, and she held on with the strength of someone who had been terrified she would arrive too late. Her face pressed into his shoulder. Her hands gripped the back of his shirt. Naruto stood still. 1 second, 2, 3. His hands rose, slowly, as if they were remembering a motion they had never performed. His arms wrapped around her, one across her back, one at her shoulders, pulling her closer. Holding her, he held her. Hattori sat on his shoulder and said nothing. The pigeon tucked its beak under its wing. The forest was silent, except for the last distant crash of falling trees. They stood there at the edge of the destruction. A killer and a craftsman, a weapon and the one person who saw the boy beneath the blade. She held him and he held her, and neither of them spoke because there were no words necessary for this. There was only the warmth of another person choosing to be here. Choosing him. Behind them, a mile-long trench carved through the heart of Fire Country's forest stood as a monument to what Naruto Uzumaki was capable of becoming when he released his full self on the world. A testament to power that had no ceiling and no equal and no apology. In front of them, held in the small warm space between two bodies pressed together, was something gentler. Something that proved the weapon was still human. Something that proved that a soul born from the coldest assassin in history could still feel arms around him and choose to stay within them. Hattori cooed. The wind blew. The sun set over the forest. and Naruto Uzumaki, reincarnation of the most dangerous man who ever lived, bearer of the leopard's transformation, master of the six powers, the living embodiment of dark justice, and the most terrifying 12-year-old the shinobi world would ever produce. Held the girl who saw him, he held her, and he didn't let go. Lee and Neji found them 10 minutes later. Lee was carrying the retrieval scroll. Neji was carrying Sasuke over one shoulder like a sack of rice. They landed in the clearing and stopped. Lee saw the trench. His eyes went wide, then wider, then impossibly wide. His bowl cut seemed to stand on end. "Naruto-san," he whispered, his voice cracking with awe. "Did you?" "Yes," Hattori said. Without Naruto lifting his chin from the top of Tenten's head, Lee's knees hit the ground. He was weeping. A mile long, the power of Lee." Neji's voice was firm. His white eyes swept the devastation. Every detail visible, every molecule of destruction cataloged by the Byakugan. He looked at his teammate, at the boy who had broken him and rebuilt him, at the quiet embrace between the leopard and the weapons master. "Let them have this." Lee stopped. He looked, he saw, and for once, Rock Lee was silent. The four of them, plus one unconscious Uchiha and one very content pigeon, made their way back to Konoha as the stars came out above the forest. The mission was complete. The defector was recovered. The Sound Five's final line of defense was a body in a clearing that would be found by Anbu in the morning and filed under threat neutralized. They walked through the gates of Konoha at midnight. The guards took one look at the group, at the unconscious Sasuke, at Lee's tears, at Neji's expression of profound respect, at Tenten walking close enough to Naruto that their shoulders touched with every step, and asked 0 questions. The debrief happened the following morning. Tsunade, the 5th Hokage, newly installed and already regretting every life choice that had led her to this desk, read the mission report 3 times. She looked up at the Anbu operative who had delivered it. A mile-long trench. Confirmed, Lady Hokage. Satellite imaging and ground survey. 1 mile, 200 meters. Average depth of 18 meters. Every tree in a 40-meter radius on both sides was felled by the residual shockwave. Tsunade set down the report. She rubbed her temples. "He's 12, she said. "Yes, Lady Hokage. He did this with his fists. Yes, Lady Hokage." Tsunade opened her desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of sake. It was 9 in the morning. She poured a full glass and drank it in one go. "Send him in," she said, "and clear my schedule for the rest of the day. I need to have a conversation with Naruto Uzumaki about the acceptable scale of landscape modification during combat operations." Naruto arrived at the Hokage's office 20 minutes later. Black suit, white shirt, slim tie. Hattori on his shoulder, hair pulled back tight. He walked through the door and stood in front of Tsunade's desk with his hands in his pockets and his face as blank as fresh paper. Tsunade looked at him for a long time. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "You killed Kimimaro Kaguya." "He was an enemy of the leaf," Hattori said. Tsunade's eye twitched. She was never going to get used to the pigeon. "You carved a trench a mile long through Fire Country's old-growth forest." "Collateral was unavoidable," the pigeon replied. "Unavoidable." Tsunade's voice was flat. "You could have used less force." The pigeon cooed. Then it spoke. "I could have. I chose the appropriate amount." Tsunade stared at the boy. The boy stared back. The pigeon stared at both of them with the serene indifference of a bird that had seen everything and feared nothing. "You're going to be a problem," Tsunade said. "I'm going to be a weapon," Hattori corrected. "Point me at the village's enemies. I will resolve them. Permanently." Tsunade poured another glass of sake. She drank it. She set down the glass. She looked at the 12-year-old assassin in the 3-piece suit with the talking pigeon and the resting muscle density of a battleship hull. "Fine," she said. "But the next time you modify the geography of Fire Country, you file an environmental impact report. In triplicate." The pigeon cooed. Naruto stood up. He straightened his cuffs. He walked to the door. "Uzumaki." He paused. Turned his head. Tsunade was looking at him with an expression that was somewhere between exasperation and grudging respect. "The Hyuga kid, Neji, he's different since your match. Better, more humble. Still a prodigy, but a prodigy who trains like he has something to prove now." Silence. "That was intentional, wasn't it?" Tsunade asked. "Breaking his worldview. You didn't just beat him, you taught him something." Hattori cooed. Naruto's mouth moved, the faintest upward twitch at one corner. Then it was gone. "By the name of Dark Justice, you will be terminated," Hattori said. Then the pigeon paused. "That was unrelated. He asked me to remind you that the environmental impact report was unnecessary, and he will be filing a counter-report citing his effectiveness." Tsunade's sake glass cracked in her grip. Naruto walked out. Outside the Hokage Tower, Tenten was waiting. She was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and a scroll on her back, and that small, warm smile that she reserved for exactly one person in the entire world. "How'd it go?" she asked. Hattori cooed. "She wants me to file paperwork about the trench." Tenten laughed. That bright, short, genuine laugh that cut through the cold morning air like sunlight through clouds. "You did reshape the entire eastern forest." "It needed reshaping," the pigeon informed her. She pushed off the wall and fell into step beside him as they walked down the main road. Their shoulders bumped. She didn't move away. He didn't move away. Lee appeared from behind a building, sprinting at full speed. "Naruto-san! Tenten, I have challenged myself to run 500 laps around the village before noon. Join me. Let our youth..." "Lee," Hattori said. "It is 9 in the morning." "Youth waits for nothing." Neji walked up from the opposite direction, hands in his sleeves, face composed. The bandages on his fingers were new. His hands were healing, rebuilding, coming back stronger. He looked at Naruto. He gave a single nod. Naruto returned it. Something passed between them in that nod. An understanding. A mutual acknowledgement that what had happened in that arena was a gift, violent and terrible, and exactly what Neji needed. The Hyuga prodigy had been trapped in a cage of destiny. Naruto's fists had broken the bars. Team Guy walked together through the streets of Konoha. A boy in a bowl cut running backward to talk to them. A Hyuga prodigy with quiet eyes and healing hands. A weapons master walking close enough to the sweeted blonde that their shoulders touched with every third step. And a blonde boy in a black suit with a white pigeon on his shoulder, walking through his village with the unhurried stride of the most dangerous thing alive. People moved out of their way. Vendors straightened their stalls. Children pointed and whispered. Anbu watched from the rooftops with the wary respect of people who recognized a superior predator in their territory. Naruto Uzumaki walked through the center of Konoha, and the village adjusted around him like water parting for a stone. This was his home. These were his people. The team that stood beside him, the girl who walked toward him, the village that slept safely because he prowled its edges in the night. He protected them through absolute force. He loved them through unwavering service. He expressed both in the only language he understood. Violence aimed outward, forever and always outward, so that the people behind him never had to learn what it felt like to face what he faced every day. That was Dark Justice. That was Naruto Uzumaki. That was the boy who had been born with the soul of an assassin and made it into something that protected instead of destroyed. A weapon pointed at the world's threats and told them in a voice as cold and final as death itself that their time was over. He had 6 powers. He had a leopard's form. He had a pigeon that spoke his words. He had a team that stood beside him. He had a girl who hugged him at the edge of a trench and didn't let go until his arms remembered what holding someone felt like. He was 12 years old, and he was the most dangerous thing the shinobi world had ever produced. And this was only the beginning. The sun rose over Konoha. Hattori cooed. Tenten's shoulder bumped against his for the 4th time. Lee was screaming about youth in the distance. Neji was walking in comfortable silence. Naruto Uzumaki, reincarnation of Rob Lucci, master of the 6 powers, bearer of the leopard model, agent of Dark Justice, and the boy who wore a suit to his own graduation, looked up at the sky. The pigeon on his shoulder spoke his final thought aloud in that measured tone, to no one in particular and everyone at once. The enemies of this village will be eradicated. All of them, permanently. Hattori settled his feathers and the morning continued. The sun climbed higher over Konoha's rooftops, and the street vendors packed their carts, and the children filed toward the academy with their parents' hands on their shoulders. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a boy in a black suit walked home through streets that parted for him like a river around stone. 3 weeks passed in that river. The village rebuilt itself around the holes the invasion had left. New timber, new plaster, New foundations poured over old scars. Naruto trained. Naruto patrolled. Naruto existed at the edges of Konoha's awareness like a blade sheathed in the wall. Present, visible, and understood by everyone who looked at it to be there for a reason. The border patrol rotation felt him on a Tuesday that smelled like pine resin and coming rain. Solo deployment. The northern perimeter? A 60-kilometer stretch of road cutting through old-growth forest that connected Fire Country's interior to the trading routes running east toward Lightning. Standard assignment. Walk the road. Note disturbances. Report anomalies. Return before dark. Naruto walked it with his hands in his pockets. Hattori rode his right shoulder with the regal composure of a bird who considered the entire forest beneath his notice. The road was empty. The trees were tall. The shadows between them held nothing worth mentioning for the first 40 kilometers. At kilometer 43, the shadows held something worth mentioning. Two figures materialized from the tree line without a sound. They did not announce themselves. They did not attack. They stepped from the darkness onto the packed earth of the road and stood there, 15 meters ahead of a 12-year-old boy in a suit, with the posture of men who had come to look at something and decide what it was. The one on the left was enormous, 2 meters tall and built like something designed to break ships against. Blue-gray skin, gill markings scoring both cheeks, a bandaged weapon on his back that was alive. Naruto could hear the thing breathing, could feel its chakra pulsing with the slow, hungry rhythm of something perpetually unfed. Kasame Hoshigaki, former Seven Swordsman of the Mist, S rank in every bingo book that still printed them. The one on the right was smaller, lean, dark hair falling past a Konoha headband scored through with a single horizontal line. Red eyes, Sharingan, active, the tomoe spinning with the patient rotation of someone who never needed to rush because the world moved at whatever speed he decided it should. Itachi Uchiha, Konoha's greatest shame. S rank by the age most shinobi were still figuring out how to throw a kunai straight. They wore matching black cloaks with red clouds. Akatsuki Naruto stopped walking. His hands remained in his pockets. His posture did not shift. His expression, already blank, already the same flat wall it had been since he left the village gates, remained exactly as it was. He looked at two of the most dangerous criminals alive with the same face he used to look at training posts, at breakfast, at the sky. Kisame's face split into the widest grin of his adult life. It stretched across blue-gray skin and exposed teeth that were pointed and numerous and designed for purposes that predated civilization. His eyes, small, beady, burning with a joy that had nothing to do with kindness, locked onto Naruto with the intensity of a man who had been looking for something interesting for a very long time and just found it standing in the road wearing a three-piece suit. Itachi went still. The Sharingan stopped spinning. The tomoe froze in their orbits. His entire body, already composed, already operating at a baseline of absolute control, achieved a new register of stillness that communicated a single thing to anyone capable of reading it: recalculation in progress. Something in the shape of the boy in front of him, in the density of his posture, in the weight his presence imposed on the surrounding air, in the complete absence of fear response from a child facing two S-rank criminals alone on an empty road, had registered on Itachi's threat architecture as a category he had not filed for. "Well," Kasame said, his voice a rumbling bass note that vibrated the leaves on nearby branches. "That's the Jinchuriki? He's what, 12? 13? He looked Naruto up and down. The grin widened further. "Nice suit, kid. You going to a funeral?" Hattori opened his beak. "Good afternoon," the pigeon said, in Naruto's measured voice, delivering the words with the composure of a senior diplomat addressing visiting dignitaries at a formal reception. "You are standing within the borders of Fire Country without authorization. State your purpose or leave." Silence. Kasame's grin did something impossible. It froze. Not because of the words were irrelevant, but because of the source. His small eyes left Naruto's face and traveled with excruciating slowness to the bird, the white pigeon, on the boy's shoulder, which had just opened its beak and spoken, in a human voice, with perfect diction and diplomatic courtesy. Kasame looked at the pigeon. He looked at Naruto. Naruto's lips had never moved. His face remained unchanged. The pigeon's small dark eyes regarded Kasame with the composed interest of a creature that found everything beneath it and was too polite to say so. Kasame looked at Itachi. Itachi was looking at the pigeon. "Did the bird," Kasame started. "Yes," Itachi said. Yes." Kasame looked back at the pigeon. The pigeon looked back at Kasame. Kasame's grin had collapsed entirely. In its place was an expression that Kasame Hoshigaki had not worn since he was a child watching his first magic trick. Pure, undiluted bewilderment compressed into the face of a man who had killed every superior officer he ever served under and had believed nothing in the world could surprise him anymore. "The pigeon talks," Kasame said. He said it to himself. He said it to the universe. He said it to Itachi, who did not confirm it a third time because twice was his maximum. The pigeon, the kid has a talking pigeon on his shoulder. It said good afternoon. It was polite about it. Kasame's hand came up and pressed against his own face. Itachi, are we in a genjutsu right now? Did someone cast something on us before we? "We are not in a genjutsu," Itachi said. His voice was flat. His red eyes were still on Hattori. "Then the pigeon talks." The pigeon talks. Kasame started laughing. It was not the laugh of a man enjoying a joke. It was the laugh of a man whose understanding of reality had been forcibly expanded without his consent. It came from somewhere deep in his chest, and it shook his massive shoulders, and it went on for 4 full seconds while Naruto stood 15 meters away with his hands in his pockets and his face unchanged and his pigeon looking at Kasame with what could only be described as patience. "Okay," Kasame managed, wiping the corner of one eye with a gray-blue thumb. "Okay, the pigeon talks. This is gonna be the best day of my life. I can feel it." Itachi's Sharingan refocused on Naruto. The Tomoe resumed their spin. The assessment was complete. Whatever Itachi had seen in that initial freeze, he had processed it, filed it, and arrived at his next action. "Naruto Uzumaki," Itachi said, his voice carried across the road like a stone skipping water. Light, exact, leaving ripples. "The Nine Tails Jinchuriki, we have come to assess you." Hattori cooed once, then spoke. "Your assessment is noted. My counter-assessment is as follows. You are trespassing. Remove yourselves or be removed." Kasame lost it again. He was bent forward, one hand on his knee, the other pointing at the pigeon. It said counter-assessment. It's doing negotiation tactics. It's a bird, and it's doing. He couldn't continue. He was making sounds that no longer qualified as language. Itachi moved. There was no telegraph, no shift in weight, no warning that the Sharingan offered to anyone watching because the Sharingan was the one doing the watching. Itachi's eyes locked onto Naruto's. The 3 Tomoe spin accelerated. The red deepened to something that was beyond color, something that existed in the space where visual information became compulsion, where sight became imprisonment, where looking was the same as being caught. "Tsukuyomi," Itachi said. The genjutsu entered Naruto's mind. It traveled through the optic nerve. It wrote itself onto the brain's visual cortex. It assembled its false reality with the meticulous architecture of the Uchiha's most devastating illusion. A world of Itachi's construction, 72 hours of subjective time compressed into a single second of the real. A cage made of perception, where the prisoner's own senses became the walls. The cage assembled. The false reality built itself. The illusion manifested inside the mind of Naruto Uzumaki, and what it found there was not a child. The mental landscape inside Naruto Uzumaki was a killing floor. 30 years of Rob Lucci's life. Every assassination performed in silence. Every target eliminated without hesitation. Every moment of physical refinement and professional violence conducted in the service of absolute justice existed in this mind as a compressed archive of experience so dense that it functioned as terrain. The floor was obsidian. The walls were the weight of accumulated killing intent. The air was the temperature of a room where emotion had been removed so thoroughly that its absence had become a presence. Tsukuyomi assembled its false reality inside this space. It built its 72-hour prison with careful precision, and the mind it built itself inside looked at the construction. Looked at it the way a weapons inspector looks at a training dummy, found the architecture wanting. The compressed weight of 30 years of professional violence began pressing against the walls of the illusion from every direction simultaneously. The false reality was a house of cards. and the mind containing it was a hurricane that had been waiting for something fragile enough to notice. The walls cracked, the ceiling buckled, the 72-hour subjective time frame, Tsukuyomi's core mechanism, the element that made it the most feared genjutsu alive, compressed backward under the weight of a consciousness that had already experienced worse things than imagination could construct, had processed them, and had moved on. Itachi broke Tsukuyomi. He broke it himself. From the outside, his Sharingan flickered, a stutter, a disruption in the smooth rotation of the tomoe that had never happened before in the history of his use of this technique. He blinked, one blink, and the genjutsu connection severed, because the caster understood in the single second of contact that maintaining the link was going to damage the caster before it damaged the target. Blood ran from Itachi's right eye, a thin line of red tracing down his cheek. Kisame had stopped laughing. His grin was back, but it was different, sharper, more focused. The grin of a man who had just watched something he didn't fully understand but recognized as dangerous. "What happened?" he asked. His voice was low, genuine confusion. Itachi was silent for 3 seconds. His Sharingan deactivated. When his eyes opened again, they were black. The simple, unremarkable black of a young man's eyes absent their bloodline power. "I entered a mind that was already a weapon," Itachi said. His voice carried the flatness of a man reporting a structural impossibility. The genjutsu had nowhere to anchor. Kisame stared at him. Then he looked at Naruto. The boy had not moved. His hands were still in his pockets. His expression was still blank. He had been attacked by the most powerful genjutsu in the shinobi world, and his body had registered this with the same response it would give to a mild breeze. Hattori opened his beak. "Interesting technique. You will not use it twice." The pigeon delivered this with the cadence of a man remarking on the weather while closing a door. Kasame's grin stretched to its maximum. Itachi's jaw tightened by 1 millimeter. Then Kisame reached over his shoulder and drew Samehada. The bandaged blade came alive in his grip, scales rippling beneath their wrappings, the living weapon's hungry chakra pulse accelerating with the excitement of a creature being presented with food. Kisame's massive frame shifted into a combat stance that moved his center of gravity forward and his killing intent outward, and his entire massive body into the posture of a man who had found something worth swinging at. "I like this kid," Kisame said. "Let me play with him." He charged. Samehada swept forward, a horizontal arc from right to left, the massive blade screaming through the air with enough force behind it to bisect a tree. The bandages tore free as the blade extended its scales, the living sword expanding to its full predatory width, every scale vibrating with the anticipation of feeding on the chakra of whatever it touched. Tekai. Naruto's right forearm rose into the blade's path. Samehada's leading edge struck his forearm. The scales made contact with skin, and the living blade, the legendary chakra-devouring weapon that had consumed the energy of 100 shinobi, vibrated in Kisame's hands like it had been swung at a cliff face. The sound was a crack that sent birds erupting from every tree in a 100-meter radius. Kisame's wrists absorbed the rebound. His arms shook. Samehada screamed, a high vibration that sounded like a creature in distress, and retracted its scales from Naruto's skin. Kisame looked at his sword. His sword was recoiling. His sword was afraid. "Samehada can't eat from him," Kisame breathed. His grin was manic now. His body density, it's like trying to feed off a mountain. There's nothing to grip. Naruto vanished. Soru. The 10 compressed kicks launched him from standing position to directly above Kisame's guard in a time frame that Kisame's trained eyes registered as approximately 0. One moment, 15 meters of road between them. Next moment, a suited figure above him, right leg already rising, the knee pulling toward the chest with the coil potential of a spring being compressed past its design parameters. Rankyaku. The compressed air blade left Naruto's leg and descended toward Kisame's position with the sound of the atmosphere splitting along a seam. The road in its path evaporated, packed earth becoming dust, dust becoming nothing, the blade's cutting edge converting everything it touched into separated halves. Kisame threw himself sideways. The Rankyaku struck the road where he'd been standing and carved a trench 30 meters long and 3 meters deep into the earth. Kisame rolled, came up, and his grin was now the grin of a man experiencing religious ecstasy. "More!" Kisame roared. He drove forward, Samehada raised, water chakra flooding the blade until the sword was a tsunami compressed into a cutting edge. Geppo. Naruto kicked the air. His body launched upward, 10 meters, 20, clearing the tree line and hanging above the canopy with the casual defiance of a body that treated gravity as an opinion. Kisame looked up. The blue-gray face was rapturous. Naruto looked down. He swung his right leg again. Rankyaku! The second air blade screamed downward, angled to split the road in front of Kasame's advance and cut off his forward momentum. The earth opened. Kisame pivoted, faster than a man his size should move, and launched himself upward on a column of water jutsu, rising toward Naruto's position with Samehada raised and chakra levels flaring. Naruto appeared beside Kisame at altitude, a lateral displacement that took him from above to beside in the same heartbeat. His right hand was already extended, index finger forward, Shigan. His finger drove forward and punched through Samehada's scales, through the blade's living flesh, through the sword and into the earth below, as Kisame released the weapon involuntarily from the impact force. The legendary sword pinned to the road like a butterfly specimen. The blade was driven 3 feet into packed earth by a single finger thrust, its scales splayed outward, its living body vibrating with distress. Kisame hung in the air for 1 second, swordless, looking down at his weapon pinned to the ground. Then he looked at the boy hovering beside him on compressed air kicks. The grin on his face was the widest it had been since the conversation began. "I haven't had this much fun in 15 years, Kisame said. Itachi's voice carried from below. The Uchiha had not moved from his position on the road. His eyes were black, his posture was unchanged, but his voice carried the authority of absolute command. "We have what we came for." Kisame looked at Itachi. He looked at Naruto. He looked at his sword pinned to the road. The internal war between obedience and joy played across his face for 1 visible second. Then he dropped, descending from the air, landing beside Samehada, gripping the handle and pulling it free from the earth with a grunt of effort. "We're leaving?" Kisame asked, his voice carrying the tone of a child told to come home before the game was finished. "We are leaving," Itachi confirmed. He had already turned. His cloak moved around him as he began walking back toward the tree line. "The assessment is complete." Kisame shouldered Samehada. He looked at Naruto, still hovering above the road on Geppo, his suit jacket moving in the wind, Hattori on his shoulder regarding the pair below with avian composure. "Hey kid, when I come back." "Kisame?" Itachi said. "Coming," Kisame muttered. He turned and followed his partner toward the trees. Then he stopped, turned his head one more time. "The pigeon, does it have a name?" "Hattori," the pigeon said. Kisame's laugh rang through the forest as he vanished into the shadows. Naruto descended. His feet touched the road, the same road he'd been walking 20 minutes ago, now sporting a pair of 30-meter trenches and a crater where Samehada had been pinned. He adjusted his cuffs. Hattori resettled his feathers. The pigeon cooed once. Naruto resumed walking home. Behind him, in the shadows of Fire Country's tree line, Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki moved through the forest at speed. They traveled in silence for 6 kilometers before Kisame spoke. "So, what are we telling the boss?" Itachi did not break stride. "The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki requires a revised plan." "Revised how?" "Every way." Kisame grinned at the canopy above them. "When do I get a rematch? That was the most fun I've had in." Silence answered him. Itachi was already gone, a body flicker carrying him ahead and away from the question and from the memory of blood running from his right eye because a 12-year-old's mind had rejected his ultimate technique by existing too hard. Kisame walked alone through the forest, grinning, Samehada humming on his back with residual distress. 15 years, he said to nobody. Best day. 2 kilometers south, Tenten intercepted the alarm signal. She had been on standby patrol, a rotating assignment that placed support operatives within response distance of the primary patrol route. The signal registered as a Class 1 engagement, S-rank threat confirmation, and she moved before the second pulse finished transmitting. She arrived at the road 4 minutes later. She found one legendary sword-shaped hole in the asphalt, 2 trenches carved into the earth with compressed wind, and Naruto Uzumaki walking away from all of it at his standard unhurried pace. She looked at the crater. She looked at the trenches. She looked at him. She said nothing. Because sometimes there were no words and they had built something together. Across training grounds and frozen forests and a mile-long trench at the border of fire country that existed in the absence of words, in proximity, in choosing to be here. She fell into step beside him. Their shoulders touched. They walked home. The years that followed moved with the pace of a blade being sharpened, each day removing material that was unnecessary, each week revealing an edge that had been there all along, waiting to be uncovered. Naruto turned 13 in a black suit with a pigeon on his shoulder and the muscles of a weapon approaching its final form. He turned 14 with sage mode in his veins and the forest floor cracking under his baseline footsteps. He turned 15 with the earned silence of something that had moved past, needing to prove itself, and had arrived at the territory of simply being. Tsunade assigned Jiraiya as supplementary trainer 3 months after the Itachi Kisame encounter. The Toad Sage arrived at Training Ground 9 on a morning that smelled like wet grass and ambition, carrying a scroll of advanced jutsu theory and the expectation of finding a student who needed instruction. He found a 13-year-old in a suit putting his fist through a reinforced concrete wall. The wall was part of the training ground's obstacle course. It was 18 inches thick, chakra reinforced. Rated to withstand B-rank techniques without structural compromise, Naruto stood in front of it with his sleeves rolled to his elbows and his right fist extended. He had punched through it with 0 technique activation. Baseline output, idle. His fist was buried to the wrist in the concrete, and when he withdrew it, the material around the hole was cracked in a web that extended 2 meters in every direction. Jiraiya stood at the edge of the training ground. His scroll hung loose in his hand. His mouth was slightly open. He had trained Minato Namikaze. He had trained the 4th Hokage, the fastest shinobi who had ever lived, the man who won a war by being too quick for anyone to touch. He had never trained anything like this. The pigeon on the boy's shoulder turned its head toward Jiraiya and regarded him with a composure that exceeded most Junin the sage had ever worked with. "Jiraiya of the Sannin," Hattori said. "You are the supplementary instructor." Jiraiya blinked. He looked at the pigeon. He looked at the boy. He looked at the hole in the wall. He set down his scroll. "Yeah," Jiraiya said. "That's me." He paused. "Kid, were you using chakra enhancement for that?" "No," Hattori said. Jiraiya sat down on the edge of the training field. He stayed sitting for a while. Mount Myoboku smelled like wet stone and ancient things. The toads were enormous, building-sized creatures that spoke with the gravity of beings that had watched civilizations rise and fall and rise again. Fukasaku, the elder toad, sat on his rock and watched the boy in the suit achieve in 3 weeks what most sages required years to approach. Naruto sat perfectly still. His body, already a precision instrument refined across 2 lifetimes of absolute physical commitment, absorbed natural energy the way a stone wall absorbed rain. The energy flowed into his cells and found pathways already open, channels already carved by decades of treating the body as something to be mastered rather than inhabited. The nature chakra entered his system and encountered 0 resistance. It filled him like water filling a vessel designed for it. 3 weeks. Sage mode, Fukasaku called an emergency meeting. The elder toads gathered on the sacred summit. Jiraiya was summoned. He arrived with the expression of a man who already suspected what he was about to hear. The boy absorbed nature chakra like it belonged there, Fukasaku said, his ancient voice carrying across the gathering. "I have never seen a body so prepared for it. His physical refinement, whatever training he has done, created a container that natural energy treats as native. There was nothing to resist, nothing to adapt. It went in and it stayed." Jiraiya looked out over the mountain. He was thinking about a 13-year-old whose resting muscle density shattered training equipment and whose baseline punching force went through reinforced concrete. He was thinking about what Sage Mode would do to that body. He was right to think about it. Because what Sage Mode did to Rokushiki was not addition. It was multiplication. Soru at Sage Mode output was not a man vanishing from position. It was a violation of the concept of position, the body ceasing to exist in one location and manifesting in another with a temporal gap that approached the theoretical minimum of physical movement. The crack of 10 compressed kicks became a single sound indistinguishable from a thunderclap, and the displacement-covered distances that regular Soru treated as its maximum at casual output. Rankyaku at Sage Mode output did not cut the forest. It cut the sky above the forest. The compressed air blade, saturated with natural energy, extended its effective range past the visible horizon and arrived at its destination with enough residual force to alter the topography of whatever stopped it. Jiraiya watched one training session with Sage Mode active. He watched a Sage Mode Rankyaku leave Naruto's leg and travel 200 meters before striking a cliff face and removing a section of rock the size of a house. He watched Sage Mode Soru close a distance of 50 meters in a time frame his trained eyes could not segment into individual frames of motion. He watched the amber deepen over blue eyes and the ground beneath the boy's feet shift its weight toward him as if gravity had opinions about proximity. Jiraiya sat down on a log. He did not move for a while. He was thinking about Minato. He was thinking about how Minato had been the fastest thing alive and would have looked at this boy and understood that speed had found its successor. He was thinking about the fact that he was supposed to be a teacher and the boy in front of him had already exceeded the curriculum of anything he could construct. "He doesn't need me," Jiraiya said to Fukasaku that evening. He never did. Fukasaku puffed his pipe. "Perhaps not for technique, but a weapon without a whetstone dulls itself against its own edge. Be the whetstone." Jiraiya considered this. He considered the boy who spoke through a pigeon and wore a suit to training, and had the resting heart rate of a man meditating when his fists were punching through walls. He considered what it meant to be a whetstone for something that was already sharper than anything he had ever touched. He decided to try. The Naruto-Tenten relationship across those years existed in fragments, in accumulated moments, in the architecture of two people building something that neither of them had a name for yet and were in no rush to name. She visited the training ground once a week. Once became twice. Twice became a standing arrangement. She trained sealing technique at one end of the field while he trained Rokushiki repetition at the other, and the silence between them was the kind people earned across months of presence. The comfortable kind. The kind that did not require filling because it was already full. One evening, the summer he turned 14, the air thick with heat and the smell of cut grass, she fell asleep against his shoulder. They were sitting on the equipment box at the edge of the field. The sun had gone down an hour ago. She had been working on a containment seal that required 12 hours of sustained chakra threading, and her hands had stopped moving mid-gesture, and her head had drifted sideways, and her breathing had slowed to the deep, even rhythm of someone whose body had made a decision her conscious mind had not authorized. Her head rested against his shoulder. Her hair brushed his jaw. Her breathing was warm against his collarbone. Naruto sat still. He sat still for 2 hours. The moon rose. The training ground went silver. His body, capable of shattering mountains, of crossing countries in seconds, of the most devastating violence the shinobi world had ever witnessed, remained completely, absolutely, immovably still. Because the girl beside him was asleep, and moving would wake her. Hattori watched this from the post above them. The pigeon sat with his feathers puffed and his beak tucked, and an expression in his small dark eyes that could only be described as insufferably satisfied. The bird had known something. The bird had known it for a long time, and the bird was watching the boy figure it out in real time and finding the process rewarding. Lee found them at dawn. He came bounding over the training ground perimeter with all the subtlety of a firework and all the volume of a natural disaster. His green jumpsuit caught the first light of morning. His bowl cut was impeccable. His eyes were streaming tears before he had even finished processing what he was looking at. "The flames of youth!" Lee screamed at a volume that caused 3 nearby birds to abandon their nests and several small animals to reconsider their choice of habitat. "Naruto-san! Tenten! Your youthful bond has blossomed into." A kunai embedded itself in the post 6 inches from Lee's head. Tenten was awake. She was awake, and her hand was already back in its resting position, and her eyes were open and locked on Lee with the focused killing intent of someone who had been woken from the best sleep of her life by a boy in a jumpsuit screaming about flames. "Lee," she said. Her voice carried the promise of additional kunai. Lee saluted. "I apologize for the interruption. However, I cannot help but observe that." A second kunai, 2 inches from his ear. Lee went quiet. His eyes were still streaming. His smile was still enormous. But he went quiet. Naruto watched all of this happen without moving his face. Hattori cooed from the post above. The morning continued. Neiji's transformation during those years was a building being reconstructed from the foundation. The young man whose worldview Naruto had broken in the arena, whose hands had shattered against a body too dense for his palms to penetrate, rebuilt himself with the same genius that had made him a prodigy in the first place, now directed at a purpose that was his own rather than fate's. He trained the way Lee trained, with commitment, with the understanding that the ceiling was something you hit and then raised and then hit again. His gentle fist evolved, the techniques becoming less about tenketsu disruption and more about finding the architecture within any defense and applying pressure where it mattered most. He stopped talking about destiny. He started talking about work. The scene happened on a training ground morning when Naruto was 14. Neji approached from the north path. His posture was open, no Byakugan active, no arms crossed, nothing defensive in the line of his body. He stopped 3 meters from Naruto and stood there in silence for a moment. Then he spoke, without preamble, without context, with the direct simplicity of a man who had thought about something for 2 years and arrived at the necessary words. "I owe you a debt." Hattori turned his head. The pigeon's beak opened. 3 words delivered with the same measured tone he used for everything, carrying a weight that was somehow both dismissive and generous. "Repay it forward." Neji nodded once. He turned. He walked away. He trained twice as hard the next morning. The years compressed. The weapon sharpened. And on the day Naruto turned 15, with Sage Mode saturating his cells in the full architecture of 2 lifetimes coiled behind blue eyes that had learned to see the amber when they needed it, the first real test arrived. The Akatsuki reconnaissance cell appeared at the outer patrol marker at dawn. 4 operatives, lower tier, lacking the names and faces of the organization's elite, but carrying the rings and the cloaks and a secondary objective that their briefing had described as test the Jinchuriki's current capability and report findings. They would not be reporting findings. Naruto intercepted them where the patrol marker met the road. The 4 operatives were spread in a standard diamond formation, one with space-time barrier jutsu, one with water release specialization, 2 close combat types carrying weapons that gleamed with poison coating. They saw him emerge from the tree line. They saw the suit. They saw the pigeon. "That's the target?" the water specialist said. "He's a kid." Hattori cooed. Naruto closed his eyes. He breathed once. When his eyes opened, the blue was different. Deeper, shaded with amber that bled inward from the edges of his irises, the natural energy running through his body until the grass beneath his feet bent toward him, and the air pressure in a 10-meter radius shifted 1 degree denser. Sage Mode. The ground adjusted to accommodate his presence. The morning light seemed to gather around him as if the sun had preferences. The operative with space-time jutsu formed hand seals. A barrier snapped into existence. A dome of compressed dimensional folding designed to contain and redirect incoming attacks, to give the formation room to maneuver, to turn any single target assault into a manageable engagement. Naruto swung his leg. Sage Art, rank Yaku. The compressed air blade that left his leg was saturated with natural energy and it filled the sky. It did not travel in a line. It traveled in a wall, a horizontal plane of cutting force that extended 40 meters wide and screamed across the space between Naruto and the formation with a sound that was less a noise and more an event. The barrier operative looked at his dome. He looked at the rank Yaku filling every direction in front of him simultaneously. He understood, in the half second before the barrier shattered like glass struck by a hammer, that there was nowhere to send all of it at once. The barrier was designed for focused attacks. This was a natural disaster wearing the shape of a technique. The wall of compressed wind hit the formation. The barrier operative went first, his dome collapsing inward and the residual force launching him backward through 3 trees. The 2 close combat types were thrown sideways in opposite directions, their bodies ragdolling through the air, with the boneless momentum of things that had stopped making decisions. The water specialist survived. He dropped beneath the Rankyaku's horizontal plane, a low duct that placed him below the cutting edge, and came up with his hands already forming seals. Water gathered from the morning dew and the moisture in the air, coalescing into a dragon that erupted from his palms and screamed toward Naruto with jaws wide and killing intent sharp. Sage Art, Rankyaku. A second air blade, angled downward, traveling at a speed the Sage Mode output lent it. The Rankyaku carved through the water dragon from snout to tail, splitting the jutsu in half, the 2 halves crashing to either side of Naruto's position in twin cascades, and continued through the user beneath it with the same single motion. The third operative was running. His feet were carrying him through the trees at maximum speed, body flicker enhanced, fear providing the adrenaline his training could not. He was moving away from the clearing and away from the boy in the suit, and away from whatever was happening at a pace that should have cleared the engagement zone in seconds. Naruto did not move. Hattori sat on his shoulder. The pigeon's feathers caught the morning light. The amber over blue eyes watched the retreating figure, and from Naruto's body a killing intent radiated outward that was something beyond intimidation. It was gravity. It was a force that pressed against the retreating operative's will with the weight of 2 lifetimes of violence and an ocean of natural energy, and the simple, irrefutable fact that the boy projecting it was the most dangerous thing within any range that mattered. The operative stopped. His feet stopped moving. His body stopped fleeing. He stood in the trees 60 meters away, and his hands were shaking, and his breath was coming in sharp gasps, and every signal his survival instinct was broadcasting was telling him to keep running, and his legs would not obey, because there was something in the air behind him that had decided he would return. He turned around. He walked back. His steps were unsteady. His eyes were wide. He walked back through the trees to the clearing, where the boy in the suit stood with amber eyes and a pigeon and 3 bodies on the ground, and he stood 3 meters away. He looked into those eyes. The eyes saw everything. The natural energy extending outward through the ground and the air mapped his chakra signature with the sensitivity of a man reading vibrations in stone. Every pathway, every tenketsu, every weak point in a body that was shaking so hard its architecture was broadcasting itself. Hattori opened his beak. Return. The word was one. The word was everything. The operative understood what it meant and what came after it, and the impossibility of a different outcome. He looked at the finger that was rising, the index finger of a right hand, extending with the unhurried pace of something that did not need to rush because the ending was inevitable. Shigun. One thrust. Tsunade received the report that evening. She read it. She added a new designation to the file marked N, Capabilities Assessment. She poured sake. It was 9 in the morning. Or it felt like 9 in the morning, because all of Tsunade's worst mornings felt like 9, regardless of what the clock said. She drank. She filed the report. She did not discuss it at the staff briefing. Some information was classified by instinct. The months that followed were a holding pattern. The tension before something broke. Naruto patrolled. Naruto trained. Naruto existed at the edge of the village like a blade turned outward. And then one morning, on a classified mission that placed him 40 kilometers north of the village, the world broke. He felt it before any signal reached him. A distortion, massive chakra expenditure at a distance, the kind of energy release that warped the ambient natural energy for miles in every direction. Sage Mode's passive sensing screamed. Then the smell arrived on the wind, burning, concrete dust, the copper of blood on a scale that meant 1,000 people at once. The direction was south. The direction was home. Naruto left a Soru crater in the ground where he was standing. The depression was 3 meters wide and 1 meter deep. The compressed force of 10 amplified kicks launched him south at a speed that turned the forest into a green blur, and the road beneath his feet into a suggestion he was already past. Hattori launched into the air to stay ahead. the pigeon's wings beating with desperate speed to keep pace with a body that was violating every reasonable measure of transit time. He crossed 40 kilometers in 4 minutes. Each Soru covered hundreds of meters. Each Geppo rebound off the air launched him forward again before his momentum died. The forest became a field. The field became the outer farmland. The farmland became the approach road. The approach road became rubble. Naruto landed at the southern perimeter. He landed in the ruins of the orphan district. His district, the streets he had walked since age 7. The apartment building where 5 Kumogakure operatives died in arterial crimson when he was a child. It was gone. A crater existed where its foundation had been. The surrounding buildings were rubble. The streets were broken open. Fires burned in 3 directions. Bodies lay beneath collapsed walls, civilian bodies, the small shapes of people who had never held a kunai. Naruto looked at it. Something happened in his chest. It was beyond fury, beyond grief. It was a crystallization, every emotion compressing into a single point of diamond-hard intent until his expression went past blank into something else entirely. Past neutral. Resolved. The temperature of his presence dropped until the ambient air around him seemed to thin and the rubble at his feet seemed to press itself lower. Pain's assault was visible across the village. 5 remaining bodies, each one a vessel for the Renegade's power, each one operating as a node in a linked system of divine authority. They had spread across the destruction like a machine designed for nothing except erasure. Konoha's defenders were scattered, fighting in clusters, buying time they were running out of. The Asura path found Naruto first, or Naruto found it. The mechanical body with its arsenal of concealed weapons and missile systems detected the new chakra signature in the orphan district and redirected, turning its armored frame toward the suited figure standing in the rubble of his own childhood street. The missile barrage came without warning. 6 projectiles launched from compartments in the Asura Path's shoulders and forearms, each one trailing fire, each one carrying enough explosive force to crater a building, each aimed at the single motionless target in the center of the ruined street. Tekai. Naruto's body hardened. Every muscle, every fiber, every cell compressing into a density that transcended the material properties of flesh. The 6 missiles struck his torso simultaneously. The detonations were enormous, fire and concussive force washing across his body in a sphere of destruction that launched debris in every direction, that cratered the ground around his feet, that turned the air into a wall of pressure. He was in the exact same position afterward. His suit jacket had char marks. His tie was singed at the tip. He had absorbed 6 direct missile impacts without shifting his center of mass 1 centimeter. The Asura Path recalibrated, its mechanical systems processing the data, adjusting its assessment, opening additional weapon ports across its body in preparation for a higher output barrage it did not get the chance to fire. Soru. Naruto appeared in front of the Asura Path. 1 step of closure from 40 meters. His right hand was already extended, index finger forward, the tip aligned with the center of the path's chest where its mechanical heart mechanism pulsed. Shigen. His finger drove through the armor plating, through the internal mechanism, through the core that animated the body with Rinnegan chakra. 1 thrust, clean, final. The Asura Path's eyes went blank. Its body collapsed inward, the mechanical structure losing cohesion as the animating force was severed at its source. Naruto withdrew his finger and turned. The animal path was 3 streets over. He could smell it. The summon contracts layered over the Renegade's base signature, the chemical trace of 100 creatures waiting to be called into existence. He moved toward it at Soru speed. The ruined streets blurred around him. He arrived as the animal path was completing its summoning gesture. A massive centipede erupting from the earth, filling the street with chitin and legs and mandibles the size of carriages. Geppo. Naruto kicked the air. His body launched skyward, clearing the centipede, clearing the rooftops, clearing everything below him until the village was a map of destruction laid out beneath his feet. 300 meters of altitude achieved in 3 kicks. He looked down. The centipede filled the street. The animal path was beneath it. He swung his right leg at full extension. Rankyaku. The compressed air blade descended from 300 meters of altitude. It fell with the weight of that distance behind it, and the sharpness of a body running Sage Mode passive enhancement. The sound it made was the sky tearing along a seam, a howling rip that caused every head within a kilometer to turn upward. The centipede split lengthwise. The two halves fell in opposite directions, crashing through already ruined buildings and burying the animal path beneath their combined mass. The ground shook. Dust rose in a column. The animal path did not move beneath the weight. 3 down, 2 remaining. The human path reached for Naruto's soul. He found it on a side street, the body with its hands extended, its power the most intimate and terrible of Pain's arsenal. The ability to extract the soul from a living body through touch alone. Its hands were raised toward him, reaching, the Rinnegan eyes burning with the certainty that one touch would end this engagement. Soru. Naruto was behind it before the hands completed their extension. The human path's reaching fingers closed on empty air. Its Rinnegan eyes registered the absence. It began to turn. Shigan. It did not complete the turn. The hungry ghost path was the interesting one. Naruto found it standing in the ruins of a collapsed market. Its barrier active, the chakra absorption field shimmering around its body in a dome of nullification. Everything that entered the field was consumed. Every technique that touched its radius was eaten. Naruto stopped in front of it. He studied the barrier for 2 seconds. The amber of his passive Sage Mode sensing read the field's architecture, its parameters, its limitations, its specific operational boundaries. The barrier absorbed chakra. It ate energy. It was designed to neutralize jutsu and technique and every application of chakra that the shinobi world had ever produced. Naruto walked into the barrier. The absorption field washed across his body and found nothing to eat, because what was approaching was not chakra. It was mass. It was density. It was a fist hardened by Tekkai to a point beyond anything the field was designed to read. The fist hit the hungry ghost path in the center of its chest. The body accelerated through 3 walls in sequence. Brick, concrete, brick. Each one shattering around the path's form as it traveled backward through the ruins at a speed that turned structural material into confetti. It came to rest somewhere in the rubble of what had been a tea shop. It did not get up. That left the Deva path. Naruto found it at the center of the devastation. The strongest vessel. The one that carried the gravitational techniques. The divine authority of Pain's most refined tool. The body that had leveled Konoha's center with a single word and a single push. It stood in the crater it had created, the massive bowl of destruction that had been the village's heart. And its Rinnegan eyes turned toward Naruto as he arrived at the crater's rim. "You," the Deva path said. Its voice was flat, infinite. The voice of a god addressing something smaller. "You killed my other selves." Naruto stood at the rim of the crater. His suit was charred and torn at one shoulder. Hattori was absent. The pigeon had launched before the fighting began, circling above the village at a safe altitude. Below, in the crater, the Deva path regarded him with the full attention of a being that operated on the scale of natural disasters. Shinra Tensei. The gravitational push erupted from the Deva path's body, the force that had leveled Konoha's center. An omnidirectional wave of repulsion that treated matter and energy with equal contempt launched outward toward the suited figure on the crater's rim. Sage Mode activated fully. The amber flooded his eyes, deep, burning, the natural energy saturating his cells until his body was less physical object and more a node in the Earth's own energy system. The Shinra Tensei struck him. The gravitational force hit his body, and the natural energy distributed the impact across every cell simultaneously, the structural reinforcement turning a concentrated devastation into something the body could spread rather than absorb at a single point. Naruto moved backward 3 meters. His heels carved furrows in the rubble, twin lines drawn in broken concrete by the friction of his resistance. He stopped. He stood back up. He adjusted the remaining lapel of his torn jacket. The Deva path stared. The Rinnegan eyes widened one fraction. This body had used that technique to flatten a village. The boy at the rim had taken it and stepped back 3 meters. Chibaku Tensei. The Deva path raised its hands. A black orb launched upward from its palms, a sphere of absolute gravitational attraction that rose into the sky above Konoha and began to pull. Everything came. The ruins lifted. The rubble rose. Chunks of street and building and foundation separated from the earth and accelerated upward, drawn to the orb's gravity, coalescing around it in layers, building a moon above the village out of the village's own broken body. The sky turned gray with lifted earth. The mass grew. The gravitational pull intensified until standing on the ground required active effort and everything loose was already airborne. A satellite of destruction assembling itself above Konoha, a weapon that would come down and bury everything that survived the initial assault. 300 meters below, in the rubble of the Western District, Tenten was bleeding from a head wound. She had been fighting since the assault began. 3 hours of kunai and chain sickle and sealed explosive tags deployed against wave after wave of the summoned creatures Pain had unleashed. She was bruised and cut and exhausted and looking up at the mass above her city with blood running into her left eye. Lee was in the eastern ruins, both legs broken below the knee, snapped by the Ashura Path's mechanical strikes before Naruto had arrived. He sat in the rubble with his useless legs beneath him and watched the sky and refused to look away. His eyes were streaming, his jaw was clenched. His fists were pressed into the broken earth on either side of him. Neji stood on what remained of the Hokage Tower's observation platform, Byakugan active, the veins pulsing around white eyes that tracked every piece of debris, every trajectory, every calculation of what happened when that mass came down. The math was unfavorable. The math said the village ended here. Naruto transformed. He gave it the weight it deserved. He stood at the rim of the crater with the gray sky above him and the broken village below him, and he let it happen at full pace. The spots erupted across his skin, golden circles on a field of yellow-white fur that spread from his hands to his arms to his chest. His body expanded. 5 feet became 6, 6 became 7, 7 became 8. His shoulders widened until his torn suit jacket ripped along every seam and fell away. His spine lengthened and curved. A tail erupted from the base of his spine and struck the rubble once, the impact sending a crack 20 meters through the broken street beneath him. His face changed. The jaw extended, the teeth grew, the ears migrated upward. The eyes, already amber from sage mode, went fully golden, the amber and the gold merging into something that burned. 8 feet of leopard hybrid form running sage mode stood at the edge of the crater. The killing intent that radiated from the combined state was a physical force. It pressed outward in rings, concentric waves of pressure that bent the debris still rising toward the Chibaku Tensei satellite that caused civilians within 200 meters to press themselves deeper into whatever shelter they had found, because something in their chests was telling them the air was wrong. The temperature dropped. The light seemed to dim. Everything within range of the presence was being told, at a level below language, that a predator of absolute magnitude had arrived, and the hierarchy of every living thing in its radius had just been renegotiated. Tsunade watched from the ruins of the Hokage Tower. Her hands were pressed against her mouth. She had seen power in her lifetime. She had seen her grandfather's wood-release reshaped battlefields, had seen Orochimaru's ambitions brought to scale, had seen Jiraiya fight with the full weight of his sage arts. She had never seen anything that looked like this. The 8-foot form, the golden amber eyes, the killing intent that was bending reality itself. She was watching a boy she had given sake-fueled lectures about property damage turn into something that made every threat she had ever assessed look like a footnote. Soru. Sage mode Soru at hybrid output. The air where Naruto had been standing was empty. There was no transitional moment. There was no frame of motion between positions. The 8-foot hybrid form was at the crater's rim, and then it was not. It was at the Chibaku Tensei satellite in the sky above Konoha, arrived at a mass of compressed debris and ruin, at a speed the Byakugan could not segment into distinct moments. Neji's white eyes tracked the departure. He saw the crater's rim. He saw the sky. He saw nothing between them. His Byakugan, the all-seeing eye, had missed the transit entirely. 8-foot clawed hands pressed against the surface of the compressed mass. The hybrid form's muscles, already dense beyond measurement, now saturated with natural energy until every fiber was a conduit for forces that exceeded the body's natural limits, contracted into the Rokuogan stance. Fists pressed, elbows tucked, the form drew one breath. Sage art, maximum yield Rokugan. The internal shockwave entered the mass of compressed debris and expanded through every aggregated piece simultaneously. It was not an explosion. It was a dissolution. The force traveled through stone and timber and metal with equal indifference, finding the internal structure of each component and resonating at a frequency that exceeded its cohesion threshold. Every piece of Konoha's ruins that had been drawn upward and compressed together was now vibrating at a frequency that its molecular structure could not sustain. The satellite failed from the inside out. The core collapsed first, the innermost layers rupturing as the shockwave's full force expanded outward through them. Then the middle layers. Then the outer shell, holding for one long half second, the entire mass trembling in the sky like a thing about to sneeze. Before the shockwave reached the surface, the mass released. Every fragment launched outward, but the internal detonation had stolen their momentum. The directional force was randomized, scattered, the pieces tumbling away from each other in every direction without the concentrated downward trajectory that would have buried the village. What should have fallen as a cataclysm drifted down as dust and pebbles. Naruto's tail wrapped around the Deva path before a single fragment reached the ground. The tail descended from the disintegrating satellite, the hybrid form, dropping from the sky with the Deva path in its grip, constricted at the waist by a limb whose crushing force exceeded anything gravitational manipulation could push against, because Shinra Tensei moved chakra-based force. And this was muscle. This was mass. This was the accumulated power of 2 lifetimes expressed through 8 feet of spotted predator that had decided the Devapath's freedom of movement was over. The tail tightened. The Devapath's Rinnegan eyes met golden amber. 3 inches of distance. The gravitational techniques were firing. Naruto could feel the pushes against his tail, but they were pushing against a constrictor's grip reinforced by natural energy, and the answer was nothing. The answer was hold. Your justice ends where mine begins. Naruto's own voice, from the hybrid form's throat, resonant, deep, carrying a vibration that shook the rubble below. His finger rose, index extended, Shigan. One thrust. The Deva path fell. The fragments of Chibaku Tensei drifted down over Konoha like snow, dust and pebbles and small pieces of what had been a weapon arriving at the ground as harmless rain. Their killing momentum erased by the internal detonation, their catastrophic potential reduced to a light coating of gray that settled on every surface. Naruto descended from the sky in hybrid form, the massive body dropping through the settling dust, landing in the orphan district with a sound that cracked the already broken street, and standing there in the quiet that followed. The transformation compressed back. 8 feet became 7, 7 became 6, 6 became 5. The fur receded, the tail retracted, the mass reduced until a boy in a torn white dress shirt stood in the settling dust of his district, blonde hair loose around his face, amber fading from blue eyes, breathing even. Every witness was silent. Tsunade's hand was against her mouth. Her eyes were wide. She was standing in the ruins of the tower that bore her title and watching a 15-year-old boy revert from a form that had just destroyed a celestial body with his fists. Lee was sobbing, one arm raised, his broken legs useless beneath him, but his voice carrying across the ruins with the same volume it always had. "Naruto-san!" His voice cracked. Relief and fury and all tangled together until the words collapsed and there was only the sound. Neji stood on the observation platform with his Byakugan still active, every data point cataloged, every impossibility recorded. His expression was the expression of a man who had already understood what Naruto was and was still staggered by the confirmation of his understanding at full scale. Hattori descended from his circling altitude and landed on a broken wall near Naruto's position. The pigeon settled his feathers. Cooed once. The sound carried across the silent ruins with the clarity of a bell. Tenten walked toward him through the rubble. She was bleeding from the gash across her left temple. Her weapon scroll was half empty on her back. Her hands were scraped and bruised, and her left eye was covered in dried blood, and she was walking toward him through the dust and the debris and the bodies of Pain's Path vessels, with her eyes on his face the entire time. Her steps were steady. Her path was direct. She crossed broken streets and stepped over fallen walls and navigated the wreckage of her village with the focus of someone who had chosen a destination and refused detour. She stopped in front of him. His hand came up, the hand that had just killed 5 bodies of a god. It pressed flat against her temple over the gash, applying pressure, the warmth of his palm against the wound. His eyes were on her face, present, the full attention of a mind that had just processed the destruction of an army and the dissolution of a celestial body, and was choosing right now to process only the blood on her face and the distance it needed to stop traveling. She covered his hand with hers. Her fingers wrapped around his wrist and held his palm against her wound, and she looked up at him with the brown eyes that had been looking at him since a training ground at noon when she was 12, and he dodged everything she threw without moving his feet. Hattori sat on the wall. The pigeon was silent. Even the bird understood this moment belonged to 2 people and required no third voice. The silence held for 10 seconds. 20. The dust settled around them. The village was alive beneath the debris, injured and broken and standing. And the 2 of them were standing in the center of it with his hand on her face and her hand on his. "You're bleeding," Hattori said after long enough. "I know," Tenten said, and she did not move her hand. 3 weeks into Konoha's rebuilding, Tsunade was unconscious in a medical ward. The healing push that saved 40 lives during the assault had cost her everything she had left, and the 5th Hokage lay in a hospital bed with monitors tracking vital signs that were recovering at the pace of someone who had given her body an impossible order and paid for it. The village worked around her absence. Structures rose, streets reformed. The sound of construction hammers was the new bird song. Then the perimeter alarm fired. A figure walking through the outer checkpoint, not hiding, not suppressing chakra, walking through the ambush sensors with the casual disregard of someone who considered detection irrelevant. A spiral mask, a single visible eye, a chakra signature that lit the sensor array like a bonfire in a dark room. Toby, the man behind the name, Obito Uchiha. The alarm reached Naruto's ears through the standard Anbu broadcast frequency. He was at the northern training ground. He was there in 30 seconds, Soru carrying him through the village's rebuilt streets to the outer wall, where the figure in the spiral mask stood 10 meters inside the perimeter, hands in his pockets, posture carrying the particular looseness of someone who did not consider their safety to be in question. Naruto landed in front of him. Black suit, repaired. White shirt, new. Slim tie, the silver clip catching morning light. Hattori on his right shoulder. The pigeon's feathers ruffled once in the displaced air from Naruto's arrival and settled. The mask turned toward him. The single visible eye, Sharingan, red spinning, regarded Naruto with the flat assessment of a man who had lost his strongest piece and come to look at the hand that took it. Naruto Uzumaki, the mask said. The voice behind it was young, younger than it should have been, carrying a weight that belonged to a man decades older. The boy who killed Pain. Hattori's beak remained closed. Naruto's own mouth remained closed. They stood. They watched. The mask watched back. "I am Toby," the figure said. "I am the architect of Akatsuki's purpose. And I have come to tell you what you are fighting against, because you deserve to understand what you are going to fail to stop." He spoke. He explained the infinite Tsukuyomi, a world without pain. Every living person cradled in a dream constructed from their deepest desires, a reality where loss had never occurred, where the people you loved remained alive and present and yours, where the architecture of grief was dismantled and replaced with something perfect. A mercy, a gift, the end of suffering achieved through the elimination of the conditions that created it. His voice changed as he spoke. The theatrical looseness left it. What remained was something raw, the voice of a boy who died at 14, watching the girl he loved crushed beneath a boulder, who watched his best friend drive lightning through her chest because there was no other choice, who watched the village that made them both into tools grind forward without pause. The voice of someone whose grief was so old and so thorough, it had become the foundation he built everything else on top of. He was not mad. That was the thing that registered. His plan was born from something worse than madness. It was born from a coherent worldview, assembled entirely from pain that had never been processed, only converted into architecture. He believed every word of it because the alternative was that the girl died for nothing, and the boy under the boulder suffered for nothing, and the decades since had been nothing. The plan was his proof that it all meant something. Naruto listened. The silence after Obito finished speaking lasted 5 seconds. Hattori opened his beak. A world with no pain is a world with no people. Obito went still. The Sharingan stopped spinning. Pain is what people do, Hattori continued in that measured tone. You want to remove suffering. You would remove everyone's choice of how to suffer. You would decide for every living person how they are allowed to feel. That is domination wearing mercy's face. Obito's jaw tightened behind the mask. His visible eye narrowed. He started to speak. His mouth opened behind the spiral, a word forming. You will not have my village. Naruto's own voice. Cold. Final. An axe through the conversation that severed whatever Obito was about to say and left the pieces on the ground between them. The words carried the absolute weight of a statement that had no second version, no negotiation, no revision. Obito could build whatever dream he wanted from whatever grief he carried. He would do it without Konoha. Obito's posture shifted. The theatrical looseness was gone entirely. What remained was a shinobi, a man who had survived for 2 decades on a combination of impossible techniques and the willingness to use them without reservation. Then I take it by force, Obito said. His Sharingan spun faster. The space around his body began to distort. The dimensional shift of Kamui activating, the technique that made his body intangible by sending portions of it to another dimension, the defensive absolute that made every attack pass through him like light through glass. He lunged. Naruto's right hand shot forward. Shigen. The finger drove toward Obito's chest. It reached the intangible zone. It passed through the space where Obito's body existed and did not exist simultaneously, through the dimensional overlap that Kamui created, finding nothing to contact. Naruto's finger emerged from the other side of Obito's form, having touched nothing. He stepped back. He processed. One attempt. One data point. Sage mode activated. The amber filled his eyes. The natural energy saturated his cells, flowing through every pathway, every muscle, every nerve, until his body was a receiver for information that existed beyond normal perception. The chakra sensing extended outward, through the ground, through the air, mapping every signature and range with the resolution that nature chakra provided, the ability to read energy patterns the way a seismograph reads vibrations in stone. And there it was, the seam. The gap between Obito's solid state and his intangible state existed as a transition, a microsecond window where Kamui shifted from one mode to the other, where the body was neither here nor there but passing between. Sage mode sensing read this transition the way a lamp illuminated a hairline crack, turning the invisible into the obvious, the imperceptible into the targetable. Obito reformed. His body solidified. He drove forward with a chakra-enhanced strike aimed at Naruto's midsection, because Kamui required solidity for the user to attack, required the body to be present to deliver force, Soru. Time to the microsecond of solidification. The window where Obito was here and only here. The impact was a sound like a building collapsing. Naruto's fist, driven forward at Sage Mode Soru speed, caught Obito in the center of his spiral mask. The mask cracked, a web of fractures spreading from the point of impact across the orange surface, pieces of it falling away, revealing the face beneath. Young, scarred, grief-worn. The right side intact, handsome even, the face of a boy who had been loved before the world taught him what it cost. The left side a ruin of scar tissue and grafted cells, the physical record of being crushed and rebuilt by something that did not care about the shape he had been before. Obito staggered backward. His hand came up to the broken mask. His face, exposed, vulnerable, the face of a man who had hidden behind a spiral for years, was open to the morning air for the first time in Naruto's presence. Naruto looked at it. He made a decision. For the first time since age 7, since a room painted in arterial spray and 5 Kumogakure operatives distributed across the floor, Naruto Uzumaki had an enemy in his reach and chose a different ending. The reasoning was not mercy. It was colder than mercy. A dead Obito was one fewer enemy. A broken Obito was an intelligence architecture waiting to be opened. And something in the exposed face, the youth of it, the grief carved into every scar, read to the leopard's instincts as wreckage rather than prey. Wreckage did not require further destruction. Wreckage required processing. He shifted his stance. Both fists came together. The Rokuogan position, but adjusted, held back. The force calculated before it was released, measured against the architecture of a single human body, and the specific outcome of incapacitation without termination, both fists pressed against Obito's chest. Rokuogan. Controlled yield. The internal shockwave entered Obito's body and expanded, finding a lung and collapsing it, finding 4 ribs and fracturing them, finding the mechanical infrastructure of a combat-ready body, and reducing its capacity to fight by 90% in a single compressed instant. Enough to take him off the board entirely. Precise enough to stop well short of permanent, Obito hit the ground. He lay on his back, breathing with effort, his mask shattered beside him, his face to the sky. His visible eye, the Sharingan, was still active, but the spin had slowed to nothing. His body was in too much distress to maintain combat readiness. He breathed, ragged, wet. 1 lung collapsed and 4 ribs broken, and the full understanding of his situation visible in the single red eye that was looking at the morning clouds above him. Hattori descended from wherever the pigeon had positioned himself during the exchange. The bird landed on the ground beside Obito's head, a white pigeon standing on packed earth regarding a fallen god's architect with composed dark eyes. "Tell me everything about Akatsuki's structure," Hattori said. "Madara's resurrection method, every operative currently active, complete information." The pigeon paused. 1 beat. "In exchange, you leave this village alive today." Obito turned his head. He looked at the pigeon. He looked past the pigeon at the boy standing above him. The boy in the suit with the amber fading from his eyes and the complete absence of hatred in his expression. There was nothing in Naruto's face that was personal. Nothing that was emotional. There was only the flat assessment of a weapon determining the most efficient resolution to a problem. Something in Obito's face changed. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but beneath it, something shifted. The expression of a man who had been carrying a weight so long he had forgotten it was possible to set it down, looking at someone who was offering a ground to set it on. Without mercy. Without kindness. Without anything except the practical recognition that this was the most useful version of what happened next. Obito talked. He told them everything. 2 hours later, Naruto placed a folder of intelligence on the table beside Tsunade's recovery bed. He did not speak. He left. When Tsunade woke the following morning and read the folder, its contents comprising the complete organizational structure of Akatsuki, the specific mechanism by which Madara Uchiha would be resurrected, the identities and capabilities of every remaining operative, and a detailed assessment of the Infinite Tsukuyomi's technical requirements, she drank 3 glasses of sake in succession and called for the senior staff. The briefing changed the direction of the war. The alliance formed across the following months. 5 villages and the samurai of the Land of Iron arrayed against the White Zetsu army, the Edo Tensei forces, and the ambitions of a dead man who refused to stay that way. The intelligence Obito provided gave them the architecture of the enemy's plan. What remained was meeting that plan with sufficient force. Naruto was deployed as an independent rapid response unit. The logic was specific and irrefutable. No squad could keep pace with him. No division could incorporate his tactics, and the most efficient use of the most effective asset on the Alliance's side was to point him at whatever was broken and step back. The battlefield reports arrived at command headquarters throughout the first day. They read like weather reports from a region experiencing unprecedented natural phenomena. Sector 7, Mountain Pass. A 300 Zetsu formation advancing on the Alliance's supply line. Unit Uzumaki deployed. Resolution complete. The report included a brief description of a suited figure arriving via Geppo above the cloud line, hanging against gray sky for 1 counted second, and then delivering a single Sage Mode Ranku aimed at the formation's center. The pass was clear afterward. The mountain absorbed the residual force. The sound it made was distant thunder. The Alliance soldiers who had been defending the pass, 40 genin and 6 chunin dug into positions along the ridge, ready to fight through attrition and fear, and the overwhelming number lowered their weapons. They looked at each other. They looked at the sky. The problem was resolved. One technique, one boy. The formation of 300 enemies was now a memory and a long scar in the earth where the past used to have a floor. A chunin from Sand Village was recorded saying, "He came from above us. He was there for 3 seconds. Then he was gone, and so were they." The Edo Tensei encounters required a different approach. The resurrected dead were immortal, bound by jutsu seals to bodies that regenerated from any damage, animated by the will of the caster rather than their own, forced to fight regardless of their desires. They could not be killed. They were already beyond death. Naruto's approach was the Rokuogen at surgical intent. The internal shockwave, traveling through the body's interior, bypassing every external defense, reaching the architecture beneath, found the Edo Tensei seal matrix and resonated at its specific frequency. The jutsu binding the resurrected soul to the regenerating body was a structure. Structures had resonance points. The Rokuogen was a weapon that attacked internal structure. The first Edo Tensei he freed was a shinobi from Mist, a legendary swordsman forced back into service, immortal and impossible to stop by conventional means. Naruto appeared in front of him via Soru, both fists pressed against the resurrected chest. One Rokuogan at the seal's resonance frequency. The glow of Edo Tensei left the man's eyes. He blinked. He looked around at the battlefield, at the war he'd been pulled into, at the bodies and the destruction and the sound of a conflict he had no stake in. His regenerating body began to dissolve, the jutsu releasing, the soul being freed, the forced service ending. He was old. He was amused. His dissolving eyes found Naruto, the boy in the suit, the pigeon on his shoulder, the amber over blue eyes looking back with complete composure. The old swordsman laughed. The sound was genuine, the laugh of a dead man being told he was free to leave by a 15-year-old in formal wear. He pointed at the pigeon. "The bird," he managed, still laughing, his body halfway gone. Does it? Hattori cooed. The swordsman laughed harder. His body dissolved completely. He was still laughing as he went. Naruto walked away. Hattori settled his feathers. The battlefield continued. Then Madara Uchiha arrived. The resurrection was complete. Edo Tensei at its absolute peak, the body of the most powerful shinobi in history, reassembled from dust and will and brought into the present with the full weight of everything he had been in life. He appeared on the Alliance's eastern flank like a storm front. The pressure of his presence felt before his form was visible. The Sharingan burning through the dust of battle with the patience of a man who had already calculated the outcome of everything within his sight and found it boring. He swept his gaze across the Alliance line. Thousands of shinobi, 5 villages united, the combined military force of the shinobi world arrayed in defense. His Sharingan stopped on Naruto. The recognition was instant. Not of the boy, but of the category. Something that stood differently. Something whose weight on the ground was heavier than the space it occupied should allow. Something that the Sharingan's threat assessment cataloged as relevant before the conscious mind had finished evaluating the visual data. "You," Madara said. His voice carried across the battlefield with the volume of a man who did not need to project because the world quieted itself to hear him speak. "Step forward." Naruto was already walking. His stride was unhurried. His hands were in his pockets. His suit was pressed and whole. He had changed before deployment because going to war in wrinkled attire was unacceptable. His blonde hair was pulled back tight. Hattori sat on his right shoulder with the dignity of a king. Madara watched him approach. His expression was the composed interest of a general evaluating an unknown variable on an otherwise predictable field. Then his eyes moved slightly to the right, to the shoulder, to the bird. Madara took one full second to process the fact that the entity walking toward him had a white pigeon on its right shoulder. His expression did not change. But the second existed. The pause was there. The most powerful shinobi in history dedicating one full unit of conscious attention to the question of why his most interesting opponent was carrying a domestic bird into a battlefield engagement. Kasame, present on the field as an Edo Tensei himself, grinning his eternal grin from the opposite side, watched this exact moment and lost composure instantly. His laugh carried across the eastern flank. Alliance soldiers on both sides of the engagement zone turned their heads because the sound of Kisame Hoshigaki laughing with genuine joy in the middle of a world war was not something any of them had expected to process today. "It's the pigeon," Kisame called across the field to anyone listening. "He brought the pigeon to fight Madara. He brought the pigeon." Madara's eyes returned to Naruto's face. He had decided the pigeon was irrelevant. He had returned to the matter at hand. Hattori opened his beak. "Madara Uchiha," the pigeon said in that measured tone, delivering Naruto's assessment with the composure of a diplomat presenting terms. "Your resurrection is temporary. Your ambitions are outdated. Your techniques are known. Leave this field or be removed from it." The Alliance soldiers within hearing range, dozens of them, watched a pigeon deliver an ultimatum to Madara Uchiha. The silence that followed was the kind that occurs when reality exceeds the processing capacity of everyone observing it simultaneously. Madara looked at the pigeon. He looked at the boy. He returned his gaze to the boy's face and made the definitive and permanent decision that the pigeon was irrelevant and the entity in front of him was the only thing on this battlefield worth his attention. This was a catastrophic error. But he would learn that later. Susanoo descended. The ethereal chakra armor materialized around Madara's body, layers upon layers, the ribcage, then the skeleton, then the musculature, then the complete warrior form. Stories tall, armed with blades of compressed chakra that could cut mountains, the ultimate expression of the Uchiha's combat architecture, towering over the battlefield like a colossus above ants. Naruto activated hybrid form. The transformation was fast. He had earned the speed through 10,000 repetitions. 2 seconds. Spots erupting across skin, frame expanding, 5 feet becoming 8. The tail erupting and striking the ground once. Sage mode already active, the amber flooding over golden eyes until both states occupied the same body at the same moment. 8 feet of spotted muscle saturated with natural energy, standing on a battlefield beneath a chakra construct that dwarfed him by orders of magnitude. The size comparison was irrelevant. Size required contact to matter. Contact required catching something. And catching Sage Mode hybrid form Soru was a question that physics had already answered. Soru. Naruto was inside Susanoo's guard before the construct's sword arm completed its first swing. The blade carved the earth where he had been, a trench opening in the battlefield, and found nothing. The hybrid form was already at Susanoo's ribcage, both Tekai reinforced fists driving forward at the chakra armor's midsection. The impact cracked Sanu's exterior, a web of fractures spreading from the point of both fists. The construct shuddered. Madara's eyes widened one fraction. He adapted. Because he was Madara Uchiha, and he had fought gods and founding fathers and things that existed before history had a name for them. Susanoo shifted, the complete warrior form adjusting, shrinking, compressing into a faster configuration that sacrificed size for response time. The second blade swept laterally at the hybrid form's midsection. Kamiye. 8 feet of muscle went limp. The spotted body bent at an angle that should have been impossible at that mass. Spine curving, torso flowing backward, the blade passing through the space his chest had occupied with a sound like a door slamming shut on empty air. The hybrid form snapped back to full rigidity and drove a clawed leg upward. Sage Art Rankyaku. The compressed air blade, amplified by Sage Mode and generated by hybrid form musculature, struck Susanoo's right arm. The gash it left was long, running from the forearm to the shoulder, the ethereal armor splitting along the cut with a sound like cracking ice. The arm flickered. The blade it held wavered. Madara's expression changed. Not fear, something colder. The recognition that a variable existed on this field that he had not accounted for in any of his previous calculations. The recognition that the entity inside the spotted body was adapting to his adaptations at a rate that matched or exceeded his own. The recognition that for the first time in longer than memory served, a fight was happening that he could not predict the ending of. He escalated. The perfect Susanoo manifested. The final form, the mountain-sized titan of ethereal armor that could reshape geography by existing. But Naruto was already disengaging, Geppo launching him above the construct's reach, above the battlefield, above the cloud line, The engagement entered a holding pattern. Naruto's speed against Madara's adaptation, Rokushiki against Susanoo, the unstoppable against the unbreakable. Neither gaining a decisive advantage, neither conceding. The exchange was buying time, time for the ceiling team moving at the flanks, time for the alliance to process what was happening, time for the war to reach its next inevitable stage. Naruto landed from the final exchange. The battlefield around them bore the marks, craters from Soru departures, trenches from Rankyaku exchanges, the Susanoo's arm sporting a long gash, and the construct flickering twice from the internal resonance of a Rokuogun applied to its base. Madara stood in the aftermath. He looked at the cracks in Susanoo's arm. He traced the gash with his Sharingan. He spoke to no one in particular, the voice of a man processing a new piece of information about the limits of what was possible. That boy. What is he? Kasame appeared beside him, still grinning, still dead, still having the time of his afterlife. He's more fun than anyone else on this field, and you know it. Madara did not dignify this with a response. His Sharingan continued to study the gash in his arm. Tenten found Naruto after. He had 3 cuts, one on his forearm where Susanoo's rib armor had grazed him during the close-range exchange, 2 on his left shoulder from debris launched by the construct's strikes. She materialized from the battlefield's edge with bandages already in her hands because she had been watching, and she had seen the hits land, and she was here before the adrenaline had finished leaving his body. She bandaged the forearm wound without asking. Her hands were fast and efficient, the same hands that deployed 1,000 weapons in combat, applying medical tape with the same precision they applied to sealing scrolls. She finished the bandage. She did not release his arm. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The battlefield was behind them. The war was continuing around them. And in the small space between his arm and her hands, there was something that existed outside the conflict, something that had been building since a training ground at noon years ago, and arrived at these moments between Vi-like water arriving at a shore. "Come back again," she said. She said it every time now. It had become the only send-off that mattered. Naruto looked at her. The amber was fading from his eyes. The hybrid form was long compressed. He was a boy again. A boy in a torn suit with a pigeon on his shoulder and a girl holding his bandaged arm. Hattori was silent. The pigeon did not intercept. The pigeon understood. "I always will," Naruto said, his own voice, from his own mouth, cold and certain, and underneath the cold, carrying something that had been growing since the first time she threw 12 kunai at him, and he dodged them all without moving his feet. Something that 2 lifetimes had been building toward. Something that proved the weapon was more than its edge. It landed. Tenten's grip on his arm tightened once. Her eyes held his for 3 more seconds. Then she released him and stepped back and turned toward the battlefield with her scroll on her back and her chin raised. "I'm counting on that," she said over her shoulder, and she was gone into the dust of war. Madara achieved the infinite Tsukuyomi on the 3rd day. The mechanism was as Obito had described. The 10 Tails power reflected through the moon, the red light spreading across the world in a wave that most people never saw coming. The living fell into beautiful dreams. Cities went quiet. Battlefields paused mid-stroke. Soldiers on both sides collapsing into the arms of an illusion too perfect to resist, their bodies wrapped in growing vines that cradled them like infants. 5 people remained standing. The shelter was a combination of forces that had no business working together and did so anyway. Naruto's Sage Mode, the natural energy radiating from his body in a constant field that disrupted the Tsukuyomi's Genjutsu wavelength at the physical level. Sasuke Uchiha's Susanoo, the ethereal armor providing a second layer of insulation, the Rinnegan in his left eye reading the Genjutsu's frequency and generating an active counterharmonic. Inside the overlap of these 2 shields, Tenten, Lee, and Neji. 3 people standing in a world that had gone to sleep. Lee's fury was a physical thing. His teammates were in the dream. His village was asleep. Every person he had ever known, Guy Sensei included, was wrapped in vines somewhere behind them, lost in a reality they had not chosen. His hands were shaking. His jaw was locked. His eyes were dry for the first time in memory because the emotion was past tears and into the territory of pure kinetic intent. Neji's Byakugan cut through the dimensional distortion, the all-seeing eyes finding the path forward through layers of reality-warping interference. His focus was absolute. The white eyes moved in their orbits, tracking seams in the dimension, mapping the route toward the source. Tenten's preparation was an enormous scroll, sealed across 3 months of anticipation, containing thousands of weapons suited for every environment Intel suggested they might encounter. Fire resistance, ice resistance, pressure resistance. She had prepared for every dimension because preparation was what she did, and being ready was how she loved. Sasuke stood within his Susanu's glow with his arms crossed. His Rinnegan turned toward Naruto. They had not spoken more than necessary in the years between their encounters. Two forces orbiting each other, the pigeon and the sword, the sweeted predator and the avenging flame. They existed in each other's peripheral awareness, the way earthquakes existed in each other's seismic range. The ceiling requires both of us, Sasuke said. Minimum words, maximum information. Hagoromo's descendants, 2 points, 2 signatures. Hattori cooed. Understood. Try to keep the scale of your contributions manageable, Sasuke said. His voice was ice. His meaning was, the last time you resolved something at full output, you carved a trench through a country. The objective is sealing. The environment needs to survive the process. Filed, Hattori said. Sasuke looked at the pigeon. He looked at it for 1 full second. Then he made the definitive and permanent decision to never engage with the fact that his co-combatant's primary communication method was a white bird. He turned away. The path to Kaguya opened through the Zetsu tree, the massive structure that grew from the combined bodies of everyone trapped in the Tsukuyomi, feeding the Ten Tails' power upward toward the divine being that waited at its apex. Dimensional pockets opened like wounds in reality. The team entered. The first dimension was fire, a world of lava and heat. The air itself a weapon, the ground a liquid threat, every surface either molten or in the process of becoming so. The heat struck them the moment they crossed the threshold. A wall of temperature that promised death to anything that could not answer it. Lee answered it by running. His legs carried him across surfaces that were seconds from liquid, his speed sufficient that his contact time with any single point was below the threshold of burning. He crossed gaps by leaping. He cleared obstacles by destroying them mid-stride, his fists and feet meeting semi-solid rock and converting it to fragments before the heat could transfer. His teeth were bared. His eyes were focused. He was moving through a dimension that wanted to kill him through the absolute commitment of a person whose body was his only tool and who would use it until it broke. Tenten deployed from her scroll, explosive seals of her own design that detonated against lava flows and redirected them, blast wave kunai that carved paths through the worst concentrations of heat, cooling arrays sealed into tags that she slapped onto surfaces to create momentary safe zones. Her preparation was paying for every hour she had spent on it. Neji called the path forward. His Byakugan found the dimensional seam, the exit point that would carry them to the next reality, and his voice carried across the heat with the authority of someone whose eyes could not be fooled. Left, 300 meters. The seam is above the lava lake. They moved. Sasuke's Susanoo provided cover where it was needed most. Naruto's Geppo carried him across the lava without touching it, air steps rendering the ground irrelevant. The second dimension was ice. The third was sand. The fourth was a void that tried to unmake the logic of human perception, a space where up was a concept rather than a direction, and the air was pressure that wanted to crush. Through each one, the team functioned. Lee's body answered every physical challenge. Neji's eyes found every path. Tenten's scroll provided every tool. Sasuke's Susanoo sheltered every moment that required it. And Naruto walked at the front through dimensions that broke human sanity, walking through them the way he walked through every space, as if the ground belonged to him, and the environment had not been adequately briefed on this, but would learn. Kaguya was waiting at the end of it, the mother of chakra, the rabbit goddess. She existed in a final dimensional space that was hers alone, a realm where the rules were whatever she decided they were, where the landscape shifted at her will, where the concept of fighting on her ground was the same as fighting inside her mind. She was ancient. She was vast. She was authority that had not been challenged in centuries. Her eyes found Naruto. The recognition was immediate. The nine-tails chakra inside him, the fragment of her own power sealed within this vessel. She reached for it, her hand extended toward him with the assumption of ownership, the gesture of a being reclaiming something that was hers, treating the vessel as a container to be opened and the contents to be retrieved. The look on Naruto's face would have given a lesser being pause. It gave Kaguya pause. The hand slowed. The assumption wavered. Something in the golden amber eyes looking back at her. The sage mode and the predator's gaze layered over each other, the combined state already running at maximum. Communicated a truth that transcended the language barrier between a goddess and a boy. The vessel was not a container. The vessel was the weapon. And the weapon disagreed with being reclaimed. Naruto transformed, full hybrid form, sage mode. Both states arriving simultaneously, the spots erupting, the frame expanding, the natural energy flooding through a body that was already exceeding every parameter of mortal capability. 8 feet of golden spotted muscle running on the earth's own power, the amber gold eyes burning through the dimensional light, the killing intent radiating in rings that bent the space of Kaguya's own dimension around him. Kaguya reassessed. The Rinna Sharingan on her forehead, the eye that saw all things, that commanded all realities, focused on the hybrid form with the full weight of divine attention. What it found was something that did not fit the category she had built across millennia of existence. The body was human adjacent, but operating on principles she did not create and could not disassemble at a glance. The energy was natural, but compressed into applications that nature had never intended. The form was bestial, but directed by an intelligence that was sharper than the instincts should allow. She opened pocket realities like doors. Lava, ice, sand, bone. Each dimension unfolding around the team with the intent to separate, to scatter them across realities where their individual weaknesses could be exploited without the combined shelter. Jeppo. Naruto kicked the air. The technique required no ground, no surface, no compliance from physics, legs that could refuse gravity in any reality, because Geppo was not a Shakakra technique, it was a physical one. The body kicked the air hard enough to treat it as solid. No dimension changed that fact. No reality warped the fundamental principle. He moved through dimensional transitions via Soru before they closed. The openings lasted fractions of seconds, windows between realities that Kaguya controlled, and Sage Mode Soru crossed them in time frames smaller than fractions. He pursued her through her own dimensions. In the lava realm, Rankyaku aimed at the surface of a magma lake. The compressed air blade hit the molten surface and split it, both halves curling upward in a wave that drove Kaguya backward from her position, the lava parting like curtains beneath a blow from something that treated the environment as a suggestion. In the ice dimension, Shigan. One finger driving forward through Kaguya's chakra construct, the first genuine wound of the engagement. Small, precise. Landing in the microsecond her regeneration was cycling between states, a hole in divine armor punched by a finger. Kaguya's expression changed. For the first time in centuries, perhaps for the first time since Hagoromo and Hamura stood against her, something was landing. Something was reaching her. The rabbit goddess was recalculating the threat level of a 15-year-old boy and finding the arithmetic increasingly unfavorable. She deployed the ash bones, the ultimate kill, bone projectiles that disintegrated whatever they touched at the cellular level. 6 of them launched from her form, aimed at the hybrid body with the intent of absolute erasure. Kamiye. The 8-foot hybrid form went limp. The spotted body flowed around the bone projectiles, the same boneless evasion that a 12-year-old had used to dodge Tenten's kunai, scaled up to 8 feet and running at Sage Mode reaction speed. The ash bones passed through empty space, each one finding air where flesh had been. The divine kill technique finding nothing to kill. In Kaguya's absorption dimension, a reality that drank chakra from anything that entered it, Naruto activated Tekai and walked forward. The absorption field washed over his hardened form and slid off like water off stone. Tekai turned the body into something that existed beyond the field's reading. A physical state so dense that the absorption technique could not find the boundary between body and energy, and defaulted to treating the whole thing as terrain. The dimensional shifts accelerated. Kaguya was moving faster now, opening and closing realities with the speed of a being using her full capabilities. Each opening was a threat. Each closing was an attempted separation. She was trying to isolate the components of the ceiling. Naruto on one side, Sasuke on the other, the conditions for the technique never aligning. Naruto crossed 3 dimensions in 4 seconds. Sage Mode Soru through each closing portal, a frame of golden spots flickering between realities, with a speed that the dimensional transitions could not outpace. He arrived at Kaguya's position in the final dimension. Sasuke arrived from the opposite direction, Susanoo carrying him through the last portal, the Rinnegan tracking the seam that Neji's Byakugan had identified from a dimension away. 2 positions, 2 signatures. The sealing technique requiring both. Hagoromo's descendants, standing at opposite points around the goddess who had birthed their ancestor, their hands raised with the sealing chakra running through them. Sasuke extended Susanoo's grip. The ethereal construct locked Kaguya in place, massive chakra hands wrapping around divine limbs, holding with the force of an Uchiha's absolute will. Naruto drove both fists forward, both fists against Kaguya's form. The stance of the Rokuogan, but adjusted, refined. The force was not the maximum yield that carved trenches through countries. It was something more specific, more targeted. The Sage Mode, natural energy acting as a binding agent rather than a destructive force. The internal shockwave used to anchor rather than annihilate, to bind rather than break. The sealing chakra ran through his fists into Kaguya's body. The natural energy wrapped around it, saturating the seal with the earth's own power, lending it a stability that human chakra alone could not achieve. The technique completed with a sound like something vast being removed from the world, a bass note that existed below hearing, that vibrated in the bones of everyone present, that said in a frequency beyond language that a chapter was closing. Kaguya's form compressed. The rabbit goddess, ancient, vast, divine, folded inward upon herself as the ceiling drew her out of reality and into containment. Her eyes, the Rinne Sharingan, the eye that commanded dimensions, went wide once. Then they closed. The world woke up. The red moon faded. The light changed, the crimson draining from the sky like ink from water. The normal blue reasserting itself with the gradual certainty of a world remembering what it looked like. Across every continent, the infinite Tsukuyomi released its hold. People emerged from their cocoons, confused, disoriented, alive. The vines receded, the dreams dissolved, reality returned. The dimensional portal opened on a hillside. Late afternoon sun, the smell of actual air, dirt and grass and distance after the warped atmosphere of Kaguya's realms. The team emerged. Lee hit his knees. He was crying. The tears that had been absent through every dimension, through every challenge, through every moment where crying would have been a luxury, they came now, in full, with the commitment that Lee brought to everything. He knelt on the grass with the afternoon sun on his face and wept with the knowledge that it was over, and his people were waking up, and the world was still here. Neji stood beside him, breathing, the tension releasing from his spine, the rigidity of sustained Byakugan deployment, of constant pathfinding through dimensional chaos, leaving his body in a single long exhale. His white eyes deactivated. His shoulders dropped. He looked at the sky with eyes that were simply eyes, simply looking, simply grateful. Sasuke met Naruto's gaze. One look, the same nod that Neji had given years ago in Konoha's streets, elevated now to the weight of everything they had survived together in the past 3 days. 2 lifetimes of distance between them and one shared war that had closed the gap to something that resembled respect. Sasuke walked away without another word. His back was straight. His pace was even. He walked down the hillside toward wherever Sasuke Uchiha went when wars ended and the world went quiet. That departure, wordless, complete, final in its lack of ceremony, was the most respect he knew how to give. Tenten was 3 feet away. She stood on the hillside with the afternoon light behind her. Her weapon's scroll was empty. Her hands were scraped raw. She had fought through lava and ice and void and bone and the interior of a goddess's own reality, and she looked like someone who chose to be here because here was where he was. She was looking at him. He was looking at her. Hattori launched from his shoulder. The pigeon flew to a nearby rock and landed there with his back to them, because even the bird understood that there were some spaces that belonged to two people, and the bird was, for once, a third presence that was choosing absence. Naruto crossed the 3 feet. His hand came up, the hand that had punched through divine constructs, that had sealed a goddess, that had carved trenches and killed armies and broken the most dangerous things the world had ever produced. It touched her face, gentle, the fingers finding her jaw, the palm against her cheek, the warmth of contact that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with the small, fragile thing that existed between them, that 2 lifetimes of learning to be a weapon had almost made him forget was possible. Tenten closed her eyes. 1 second, 2. Then they opened, brown and warm and certain, and her hand came up and covered his and held his palm against her face, the way she had held it against her wound in the ruins of Konoha. "You came back," she said, short, real, carrying the weight of every time she had said it and every time he had answered. He looked at her, the full attention, the whole mind, everything that had been pointed outward for 2 lifetimes. Every instinct, every reflex, every molecule of purpose was pointed at her face and her eyes and the warmth of her hand over his. She rose onto her toes, or he bent toward her, or both, the distance closing from 2 directions at once, the gap between them reducing with the same inevitability that had governed everything between them since a training ground at noon when they were 12. The kiss was short, real, earned across every mile of it. Every Soru crater and Rankyaku scar and mile-long trench and frozen forest. Every pigeon coo in a silence that belonged to them both. Every training session that became something else without either of them naming it. Every time she said, "Come back," and every time he did. It landed the way a door opened for the first time after being closed for a long time. Without ceremony, without drama, with the quiet certainty of something that was always going to happen, arriving exactly when it should. Hattori looked at the sky from his rock. The pigeon's dark eyes reflected the afternoon light. In the distance, very much in the distance, Lee was screaming about the flames of youth at a volume that suggested his recovery from emotional devastation was complete. Neiji's voice followed, flat, measured. Lee. 1 word. The word of a man choosing which battles to fight and selecting none. None of it reached the 2 people on the hillside until they were ready to let it. Konoha rebuilt itself the way it always rebuilt itself, with wood and stone and the stubborn refusal of people who had been knocked down before and refused to interpret it as a permanent condition. The orphan district rose on new foundations. The apartment building stood again. Different walls, same address, the same street that a 7-year-old in torn pajamas had stood on with blood that belonged to other people cooling on the floorboards. Naruto was 16. The war was over. The world was awake and whole and scarred and learning what came after. The streets of Konoha were full. Vendors and children and genin teams and the endless traffic of a village that had survived everything thrown at it and was choosing every morning to be here another day. He walked them the way he had always walked them. Black suit, white shirt, slim tie with the silver clip catching the afternoon light. Hattori on his right shoulder, feathers immaculate, composure absolute. The unhurried stride of the most dangerous thing the shinobi world had ever produced, moving through his village with the ownership of something that had claimed this ground when he was 7 and had defended it every day since. People made way. The radius formed around him. That instinctive space that appeared wherever he walked. The unconscious acknowledgement of a presence that exceeded the normal parameters of proximity. Children pointed. New genin whispered his name to each other. They watched him pass with wide eyes, and the particular reverence of young people, seeing something they have only heard stories about, confirming itself in real time. The ambu on the rooftops tracked him out of habit and respect. Their masks followed his path down the main street. The stillness they held, the absolute absence of movement as he passed beneath their positions was their version of a salute. Training ground 9 at the end of the day. The sun was low. The field was gold with late light. The training post threw long shadows across packed earth that had absorbed the impacts of 10,000 Shigan repetitions and 10,000 Rankyaku scars, and still stood, because the ground here was stubborn, and so was everything that trained on it. Tenten was at the edge of the field. Her arms were crossed. Her back was against the largest training post, the same post that held 10,000 of his finger holes, the same post she had watched him destroy and rebuild and destroy again across years of evenings that were theirs alone. That small, warm smile was on her face, the one that existed for one person in the world and appeared for him like dawn appeared for the horizon. Certain, earned, and waiting, Naruto stopped in front of her. 3 feet of distance, the same 3 feet, always the same 3 feet between them before one of them closed it. Hattori cooed once. The sound carried across the empty training ground with the clarity it had always carried, a bird's voice in a quiet space, familiar and final and exactly where it belonged. The pigeon opened his beak. The enemies of this village will be eradicated. Beat, Tenten's smile widened. She knew what came after. She had learned the rhythm of him, the pigeon's voice and then his own, the broadcast, and then the quiet truth that followed it. Naruto's own mouth opened, his voice, the deep register, the cold certainty, and underneath it now, underneath the frost and the weight, and the 30 years of a previous life's killing floor, something warm, something that had been earned across a lifetime of choosing to come back to this place, to this person, to this field where everything between them had been built. A weapon finds its meaning in what it chooses to protect, he said. The words were his own, new, final. The distillation of everything 2 lives had taught him, that power without direction was destruction, that violence without purpose was waste, and that the difference between a weapon and a monster was whether someone was waiting for you when the fighting stopped. Tenten's arms uncrossed. She pushed off the training post. He closed the 3 feet. His hand found hers, their fingers interlaced, the hand that had killed armies holding the hand that had armed them. "I'll be back before dark," he said. It landed like a door opening, like a promise that was also a homecoming, like the final word of a story that had always been about this, about the distance between what he was and where he belonged, and the girl who stood at the end of it and never once looked away. Tenten squeezed his hand. "You'd better be," she said. "I sharpened new kunai. Someone needs to dodge them." Hattori cooed. The sun set over Training Ground 9. The golden light fell across 2 figures at the edge of the field. A boy in a black suit with a pigeon on his shoulder and a girl with a weapon scroll on her back, their hands together, the village behind them alive and whole and sleeping safely because he prowled its edges and she sharpened the blades that kept the edges keen. The evening was warm. The training ground was quiet. The pigeon tucked his beak under his wing. Naruto Uzumaki was home.
Thanks for watching the complete movie. If this absolute unit of a story hit you the same way it hit me, smash that subscribe button for more unhinged what-if chaos. Drop a comment with your favorite kill. See you in the next one.